You've lived your entire life believing that reality is stable, that the ground beneath your feet is fixed, that history has unfolded in a way that makes sense. But what if none of that was ever true? What if every certainty you cling to was only scaffolding for a collapse that has already begun inside your mind? You believe the floor is solid. You believe the body you carry is weight, flesh, bone. You believe solidity is proof. Yet from the very beginning, science has whispered that this is not so. What you call matter is mostly absence, a suspension of emptiness, woven together by fragile forces, patterns of probability masquerading as things. The surface you trust is a mask stretched over a void, and the void itself is more real than anything you have ever touched. Atoms, your body. This page, the walls around you are not dense, indivisible marbles as once imagined. They are clouds, fields, probabilities. 99.9999% of every atom is emptiness. What you call touch is not atoms meeting atoms, but repulsion, electrons refusing to occupy the same space, electric fields pushing against one another. Your hand has never touched a table. Your skin has never touched another's. Everything you have felt was only the illusion of contact, an elaborate lie of physics dressed up as intimacy. You think you are anchored in a physical body, but the body itself is a flicker of energy fields, unstable, ephemeral. The quantum vacuum beneath everything is not nothing. It seethes with fluctuations, particles emerging and vanishing too quickly to be measured. The emptiness of space is more alive, more restless than the solidity of your bones. And if the ground beneath you is an ocean of uncertainty, what, then, are you standing on? Consider this. Your body is made of atoms forged in ancient stars, a fact you may find poetic. But the stars themselves are burning on borrowed time, fusion processes balancing precariously until collapse. The carbon in your cells, the calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, none of it belongs to you. It was created in furnaces that exploded long before Earth existed. You are built out of stellar violence, assembled out of scattered remains. You have never been your own substance. You are a borrowed structure, and yet even that structure is deceptive. If you tried to locate the particles that form you, you would fail. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle does not allow you to know both where something is and how it moves. Reality blurs the instant you try to pin it down. To observe it is to disturb it. To measure is to deform. You are built on laws that refuse to reveal themselves fully. Laws that withhold certainty like a cruel parent withholding food from a starving child. Philosophers long before quantum theory already knew the trap. George Berkeley argued that matter itself might not exist outside perception, that all you have are sensations, taste, touch, sight, sound depending on the perceiver. What if the world does not exist without you to observe it? What if reality is only the continuation of perception, an elaborate hallucination held together by the consistency of memory? If no one stands in the forest to hear the tree fall, perhaps it not only makes no sound, it makes no fall, no tree, no forest. You may try to escape into the refuge of history. Others have existed before me, so reality must be stable. But history itself is written by perception. Every record is a memory. Every artifact is an interpretation. Every textbook a story retold and retold until fact has melted into myth. What if even the certainty of the past is a construct, a script imposed on chaos so that you would not scream? Science, in its most brutal honesty, admits this. Solidity is false, matter is unstable, and certainty is unavailable. All you have are probabilities stacked into structures that seem stable only because you cannot hold the collapse in your mind for more than a second. If you truly grasp the emptiness of matter, the vanishing of particles, the way observation itself changes the observed, you would never again trust the floor beneath your feet. And still, you cling. You cling to the tactile, the feeling of your hand pressed against your leg, the solidity of a wall against your back. But remember this, at no point has your body ever touched anything at all. You have never touched, and you have never been touched. You are an untouchable ghost suspended in a field of forces. Every embrace was distance, every kiss a gap, every sensation an elaborate lie written in the language of electrons. So tell me, if you have never once touched the world, and the world has never once touched you, then what exactly do you believe is real? You live inside the rhythm of seconds. You mark your life with the slow tick of clocks, the cycle of sunrise and sunset, the thin shadows cast at noon. You imagine yourself carried forward like a passenger on a riverboat, each passing moment replaced by another, the past receding behind you, the future stretching out in front. But that image is a lie. The river may not be moving. It may never have moved at all. Physics does not describe time as you experience it. Einstein dismantled the illusion of simultaneity more than a century ago. In his relativity, time is bound to space. They are one fabric, not separate threads. The event you call now is not absolute. To someone moving differently than you, faster, slower, in another gravitational field, your now is not their now. Two events you call simultaneous may not be simultaneous at all. The universe does not care about your sense of before and after. If you stand still on Earth and look at a clock on a speeding spacecraft, that clock ticks slower. If you ride inside the spacecraft and look at Earth's clock, the Earth ticks slower. Both are correct. Both are true. There is no single flow of time, only warped perceptions, stretches and compressions woven into the geometry of space-time. The passage of time depends on where you stand and how you move. If time flows differently for different observers, then what is the real time? Some physicists go further. The block universe theory argues that past, present, and future all exist at once, like pages in a book. You imagine you are on page 53, reading line by line, but in truth, pages 1 through 500 are already there, fixed, unchanging. Your sense of moving forward is not the universe unfolding, but consciousness scanning through something already written. If that is true, your birth is happening now, your death is happening now, every joy and every horror is eternally present. Nothing is unfolding. Nothing is becoming. Everything already is. Your brain revolts against this idea. It insists on flow, on continuity, on movement. But neuroscience undermines even that fragile defense. Your conscious experience lags behind reality by fractions of a second. The Libet experiments in the 1980s showed that your brain makes decisions before you are aware of deciding. The signal to move your hand arises in neural tissue milliseconds before you consciously choose to move it. You are a spectator watching the playback of a choice already made. Consciousness is late to its own life. That delay, barely perceptible, is enough to fracture free will. If your awareness comes after the decision, then your feeling of agency is an illusion stitched on top of machinery. You tell yourself, I chose this, when in fact the choice was delivered to you, already formed, already executed. Free will collapses, and with it the illusion of flowing time, because without choice, what does it mean to move forward? You are not walking through time. You are being played back by it. Think about memory. You remember yesterday, but not tomorrow. That asymmetry tricks you into believing time has a direction. Yet memory is nothing more than electrical encoding in neurons, patterns preserved in fragile tissue. The arrow of time exists only because you can recall one direction and not the other. If memory could run backward, if you recalled the future as vividly as the past, you would no longer believe in forward flow. The arrow is not cosmic. It is neurological. Entropy is often called the true arrow of time, the measure of disorder increasing in closed systems. You are told that eggs break, but do not unbreak, that smoke disperses but does not reassemble. But entropy, too, is statistical. The laws of physics are reversible. Nothing forbids an egg from unbreaking, except improbability. You mistake improbability for impossibility. You tell yourself time flows forward because you never see the reverse. But the reverse is written into the equations. The universe does not privilege your experience of one-way decay. And history, what is it but the worship of time's arrow? You believe in progress, decline, cycles, eras. But every record of history is incomplete, fragmented, altered by those who preserved it. What you call the past is not a stable place, but a reconstruction, filtered through human bias. If memory at the individual level is fragile, why assume collective memory is any stronger? You may think history proves the reality of time, but history is only a story repeated often enough to feel inevitable. Now consider your own life. You believe in aging because you see it in the mirror, because you feel stiffness in your joints. But your cells replace themselves. Your molecules cycle. Your atoms do not grow old. The you of 10 years ago is not gone. It is simply rearranged, recycled. What you call aging may be less about time flowing and more about entropy expressing itself in fragile biological machinery. The march of time is, again, an interpretation, a story you tell yourself about decline. And what of sleep? 8 hours vanish into nothingness every night. You close your eyes, time ceases, and then you wake, the clock having jumped forward. Where did those hours exist? Did you live them? Did they happen without you? If consciousness defines your sense of time, then unconsciousness erases time completely. You spend 1/3 of your life annihilating time, deleting it from your existence. Yet you pretend the stream never falters. So here you are, clinging to clocks, calendars, memories, stories of progress, convinced that time carries you somewhere. But the deeper you look, the more it collapses. Time is relative. Time is delayed. Time is reversible. Time may not exist at all. And if that is true, then the thing you fear most, death, may not be an end, but neither is life a beginning. Both are written, both already there, both meaningless in a universe where movement itself is illusion. You believe you are moving toward something. You believe there is a future waiting for you, a tomorrow that has not yet been shaped. But if all time exists simultaneously, if every decision is already encoded, then the future is not waiting. It is already fixed. You are not moving toward it. You are imprisoned inside it. And so the question you must face is this. If the future is already real, and you are only watching yourself arrive at it, then are you alive at all? Or are you only remembering yourself in advance? You trust your memory as the anchor of your identity. You believe that who you are today is continuous with who you were yesterday, because you can recall the thread that ties them together. Without memory, you would be unmoored, lost, dissolved. And yet, memory is not a stable recording. It is a reconstruction, fragile, unreliable, and often false. The story of yourself is stitched together by a mechanism that lies to you constantly, and you accept those lies as the only evidence that you exist. Psychologists have long dismantled the illusion of memory's reliability. Elizabeth Loftus demonstrated with brutal clarity that human memory can be implanted, altered, fabricated. In her studies, subjects were convinced that they had seen things they never saw, that they had been lost in a shopping mall as children when no such event ever occurred. Suggestion alone, framed with authority, bent their recollections into fiction. If you can be made to remember what never happened, then what does it mean to trust your past? Even without manipulation, memory is fragile. Each time you recall an event, you do not retrieve a perfect record. You reconstruct it, reshaping details in the act of remembering. Memories degrade, twist, conform to present beliefs. Every recollection is less a playback than a rewriting. The memory you cherish of your childhood, your first love, your deepest pain, each time you summon it, you distort it. What you carry is not the original, but a palimpsest, layers of rewriting until the original is unreachable, perhaps already erased. This fragility infects not only your personal history, but your perception of reality itself. Consider eyewitness testimony, long revered in courts. Decades of research reveal its unreliability. Witnesses recall weapons that never existed, misidentify faces, alter sequences. Courts have condemned people to death on the testimony of memory, only to have DNA later prove those memories false. If memory can kill the innocent, what does that say about the trust you place in it to preserve your own life story? And what of trauma? You think pain sears events into permanence, yet trauma often fragments memory instead. Some experiences shatter into dissociated fragments, distorted or inaccessible, while others are inflated, magnified beyond proportion. Memory does not reflect the world. It reflects the needs of survival, the distortions of fear, the defense of the ego. You are not remembering the truth. You are remembering the version of truth that allowed you to survive. Your identity, then, is an unstable archive. When you say, "I am myself," you mean, "I remember myself." But if memory is a liar, if it can be bent, erased, rewritten, then the self is only a fabrication. You are not who you were yesterday. You are who you think you were yesterday. The self is a hallucination, supported by a hallucination. Consider amnesia. When memory fails catastrophically, the self unravels. Patients with retrograde amnesia lose their sense of continuity, unable to recall their past. Yet they continue to live, to speak, to move. The body persists while the self dissolves. Does that not prove that identity is not housed in flesh, but in the fragile machinery of memory? Without it, you disappear, even while the organism remains alive. And what of false memory syndromes, when entire groups of people recall the same event that never occurred? The Mandela effect describes collective misremembering. People insisting Nelson Mandela died in prison in the 1980s. People remembering movie lines that never existed, brand names spelled in ways they never were. Dismissed as trivial quirks, they reveal something darker. If entire populations can share false memories, then consensus reality may itself be only an echo chamber of error. Reality may not be what happened. It may only be what enough people insist happened. Neuroscience digs deeper still. Memories are not static imprints, but patterns of synaptic connections, chemical modifications in fragile tissue. They can be disrupted, erased, or rewritten by altering proteins. In experiments, researchers have implanted fear responses in mice by manipulating neurons, making them afraid of spaces they had never entered. Memory is biology, not truth. If memories can be edited at the level of molecules, then the you that you trust can be altered in a lab. If your entire history can be reprogrammed, what remains of authenticity? Even when memory does not fail, it deceives by omission. You cannot remember most of your life. Years collapse into fragments, a handful of moments, images, sensations. You have already lost more than you remember. Where are those vanished years? Do they exist anywhere? If your memory is the only proof they happened, and that memory is gone, then for you, they never existed at all. Your own life has already been deleted. But here is the most devastating truth. You are remembering now. In this moment, as you read these words, you will try later to recall the experience. Yet what you recall will not be what you are feeling now. It will be a reconstruction. Even this instant, the present you are living, will soon become a distorted echo. There is no pure experience, only flawed recollection. So ask yourself, if memory is the foundation of the self, and memory is a liar, then what is the self but a lie that believes itself? You think you see the world, You believe your eyes deliver reality directly, like windows opening onto what is. But perception is not reality. Perception is construction, hallucination shaped into coherence by the brain. What you call sight, sound, touch, taste, smell, all of it is manufactured, edited, filtered, and filled in. You do not see the world as it is. You see the world as your brain decides you must in order to survive. Look at the blind spot in your eye. There is a hole in your vision where the optic nerve exits the retina. You should see absence, a black void, but you don't. Your brain fills the hole with invented detail, blending the surroundings so you never notice. This deception is constant. At every moment, your brain edits the world, inserting what isn't there so that you won't detect the gaps. If you cannot even see the absence in your own sight, how can you trust any of it? Perception is active fabrication. Optical illusions prove it. A set of static lines appears to move. Two identical colors appear different in contrasting contexts. An ambiguous image flips between interpretations. Your brain imposes patterns, guesses at meaning, discards possibilities. You never see raw data. You see predictions, hypotheses, shortcuts. In fact, neuroscientists now argue that perception is prediction itself. Your brain constantly forecasting what should be there, and then correcting when wrong. You do not passively receive reality. You hallucinate reality, corrected only when your hallucination fails. Think of sound. You believe you hear vibrations in the air as they are, but the Majorque effect shows that what you see changes what you hear. Watch a mouth form ba, while the sound says da, and you hear tha, a third sound that doesn't exist. Your brain merges senses into a false construction. You think hearing is objective, but even sound is bent by context, rewritten before you are aware of it. Touch deceives as well. In the rubber hand illusion, if a fake hand is stroked in sync with your hidden real hand, you begin to feel the fake hand is yours. The boundary between body and world shifts. Your sense of ownership can be hijacked. The body you feel as yours is negotiable, adjustable, open to manipulation. Even the line between self and object is unstable. Perception of time, too, is a trick. Under fear or danger, time slows. Under monotony, it accelerates. Time expands and contracts, depending on attention and arousal. If time itself is perceived differently, depending on the state of your brain, then what you feel as objective flow is nothing more than distorted interpretation. You do not perceive time, you distort it into whatever shape keeps you alive. Hallucinations make the truth undeniable. Those who suffer psychosis see and hear with the same conviction you apply to reality. To them, voices are real, visions are undeniable. The line between hallucination and perception blurs, because both are generated by the same brain. The only difference is whether the hallucination agrees with consensus. You think you are sane because your hallucinations align with those of others. But consensus does not prove reality. It only proves agreement. Even in waking life, you live inside controlled hallucinations. Neuroscientist Enel Seth calls consciousness a controlled hallucination, your brain's best guess about the causes of sensory inputs. That guess happens to be useful most of the time, but usefulness is not truth. The tiger you see in the grass is not the tiger as it is, but the tiger as your brain models it. The world you inhabit is not the world, it is the model, the hallucination, the useful fiction. Language amplifies the illusion. You categorize colors into words, yet languages divide color differently. Some cultures have no word for blue. Their perception of blue is diminished. What you think you see is bound by the categories of language you inherit. Your perception is imprisoned by words, by labels, by the cage of concepts that predate your birth. Now ask yourself, if every sense can be deceived, every input altered, every construction fabricated, then what does it mean to say you see reality? You do not see it. You cannot. You see what evolution required you to see in order to avoid death long enough to reproduce. You see only what was adaptive, never what was true. Donald Hoffman, cognitive scientist, argues that natural selection does not favor truth but fitness. Organisms that saw useful illusions outcompeted those who saw reality. Truth is lethal. Illusion is survival. If that is so, then the world you see is designed not to be real, but to be false in exactly the way that kept your ancestors alive. So when you look around the room, when you glance at your hands, when you see the faces of those you love, you are not perceiving reality. You are perceiving an interface, like icons on a desktop. The icons are not the files. The perception is not the world. You live inside a hallucinated interface, and you mistake the interface for truth. But if perception is only hallucination stabilized by consensus, and memory is only lies stabilized by repetition, then what is left that you can trust? You cling to the body as the last refuge of certainty. You may doubt your memories, your perceptions, even the flow of time itself, but the body feels undeniable. You can see it, feel it, measure it. It bleeds when cut, it hungers when starved, it withers as years accumulate. Surely, if nothing else, this organism is yours. But even here, at the very core of your existence, the illusion deepens. The body you call mine has never been yours. Begin with the simple fact that the cells of your body are not constant. They are replaced, recycled, destroyed, and rebuilt. Most of your skin cells last only a few weeks before being shed into dust. The lining of your stomach renews every few days. Even bone tissue, seemingly solid, is continuously dismantled and rebuilt. Within a decade, nearly every part of you has been replaced. The body you defend today is not the body you inhabited 10 years ago. You are not a single organism enduring through time. You are a wave of replacement, an impermanent configuration of matter passing through. And even that matter is not yours. The atoms that form you did not originate with you. They were forged in ancient stars, scattered in explosions, drifting across billions of years before coalescing into Earth, into food, into air, into you. You inhale atoms exhaled by strangers, by ancestors, by animals long extinct. You eat molecules once part of trees, oceans, and corpses. Every breath, every bite, every sip merges you with the dead. You are stitched together from borrowed remnants. Nothing in you belongs to you. Worse still, not all of you is even human. Your gut, your skin, your mouth colonies of microbes outnumber your human cells. The microbiome is essential to digestion, immunity, even mental health. Without these alien organisms, you would die. By cell count, you are more non-human than human. By gene count, you are vastly outnumbered. What you call your body is not an individual, but an ecosystem, a swarm, a temporary alliance of species. You are not one, you are many. And then there is the nervous system, the seat of what you call the self. You think the brain is a unified control center, but neuroscience reveals it as a chorus of competing networks. Different brain regions initiate conflicting actions, inhibit each other, override signals. The self emerges as a compromise between warring modules, not a commander issuing orders. There is no central you directing the body. There is only negotiation among fragments. Consider the split brain experiments. When the corpus callosum is severed, the two hemispheres operate independently. One hand buttons a shirt while the other unbuttons it. One hemisphere speaks while the other remains silent. When asked why they performed an action initiated by the opposite hemisphere, patients confabulate make-up reasons best. The speaking hemisphere has no access to the truth. Consciousness lies to itself rather than admit ignorance. What you call a unified self is nothing but a patchwork illusion built to hide division. Even basic bodily control betrays you. The autonomic nervous system runs most of your functions without your constant heartbeat, digestion, hormone release. You cannot will your pancreas to secrete insulin, nor can you will your cells to divide. The body operates on its own, indifferent to your so-called ownership. The parts you think you control, your hands, your voice, your movements are themselves, prepared unconsciously before you become aware of choosing. The self that claims ownership is always late, always behind, always grasping at an action already begun, and then disease arrives to strip the illusion bare. Alzheimer's dissolves memory. Parkinson's trembles the hand against the will. Cancer rewrites the body into a grotesque replication machine. In each case, the body shows you how little control you possess. You do not own it. You inhabit it briefly, until it turns against you, until it betrays you. Death is the final betrayal. The moment of your last breath proves the body was never yours. It belonged to processes far older, far colder, far more indifferent. The cells disassemble, microbes devour, atoms disperse. The body becomes once again what it always was, material on loan. You tell yourself it was yours, but the evidence insists otherwise. And so the question emerges, sharp and unavoidable. If the body has never truly belonged to you, if it is a temporary arrangement of foreign matter, alien organisms, and unconscious processes, then who or what are you? You cling to consciousness as your final sanctuary. Even if memory deceives, perception hallucinates, time collapses, and the body betrays you, surely the fact that you are aware, this flickering presence you call, I must be real. Descartes famously declared, cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. But what he mistook for bedrock is only another abyss. Consciousness feels indivisible, like a spotlight illuminating the theater of experience. Yet neuroscience has dismantled that unity. The brain is not a stage, but a machine of parallel processes. Different networks handle sight, sound, language, movement, emotion. They operate asynchronously, and what you experience as now is a stitched-together summary. Experiments by Benjamin Libet and later researchers show that unconscious brain activity precedes conscious decision-making. When you move your hand, the readiness potential in your brain spikes hundreds of milliseconds before you feel the decision to move. Consciousness is not the origin of action. It is the witness, arriving late, claiming ownership after the fact. This delay exposes consciousness as narration, not command. The brain executes, and the voice in your head tells a story about why you did it. The story is not true. It is confabulation. Split brain studies reveal this with brutal clarity. When one hemisphere acts outside the awareness of the other, the speaking hemisphere invents an explanation to preserve the illusion of unity. The brain lies to itself, and you are that lie. If consciousness is narration, then who is listening? Is there even a listener, or only endless narration feeding itself? The voice in your mind that says, I am me, is itself just another process, neurons firing in recursive loops. There is no inner homunculus, no ghost in the machine. There is only machinery describing itself, and you mistake the description for an experiencer. Philosophers call this the hard problem of consciousness. How can physical processes give rise to subjective experience? But perhaps the question is inverted. Perhaps subjective experience is not something produced, but something misinterpreted. Perhaps what you call awareness is not an additional layer, but an error. The brain mistaking its own self-monitoring for something more. A hallucination generated by a hallucination. Consider blindsight. Patients with damage to the visual cortex insist they cannot see. Yet when asked to guess where an object is, they guess correctly above chance. The visual information is processed unconsciously. What this proves is chilling. The brain can perceive without awareness. Consciousness is not necessary for perception. It is extra, superfluous, a commentary layered on top. The seeing is real. The awareness of seeing is optional, or anesthesia. Under the knife, you disappear. Entire hours vanish, not into sleep, not into dream, but into absolute absence. Yet your heart beats, your brain regulates your body, your cells divide. You return and insist you are gone. But where did you go? If consciousness can vanish without interrupting life, what does that say about its necessity? You are not sustained by it. You are not defined by it. It comes and goes like a fragile trick of light. The self, which consciousness insists on, is also an illusion. The default mode network in the brain generates the narrative of selfhood, but under psychedelics or meditation, that network quiets. The sense of I dissolves. Experience remains sound, color, sensation, but without an owner. The world happens, but not to anyone. This state, called ego dissolution, shows that the self is not essential. It is a construct that can be dismantled. Even more disturbing, experiments in neuroscience suggest consciousness is not continuous, but discrete. A sequence of frames, snapshots stitched together like a film reel. Your sense of seamless flow is just the stitching. Between frames, there may be nothing. Gaps in which you do not exist, stitched over so you never notice. You are not continuous. You are flickering. And if consciousness is flickering, narrated, confabulated, and unnecessary, then what are you left with? Only machinery. Only neurons firing, synapses sparking, chemicals flowing. Your thoughts, your feelings, your very sense of existence are nothing more than biological processes humming in temporary harmony. The voice that says, I am, is not proof of being. It is the echo of gears grinding in wet flesh dot, but echoes fade. Machinery breaks. The processes will stop. The voice will fall silent. And when the echo ends, there will be no you to mourn the silence dot. So here is the question you cannot escape. If consciousness is only narration, only echo, only illusion, then who is it that you think is listening to these words right now? You believe you are the author of your actions. You wake in the morning, decide to rise, choose your clothes, plan your day, as if each decision is freely made. You feel the weight of choice, the responsibility of selecting one path over another. You imagine yourself as a captain steering through possibilities. But the deeper you look, the more fragile this image becomes. Free will does not survive scrutiny. It withers into machinery, into inevitability. Begin with the experiments of Benjamin Levitt in the early 1980s. Subjects were asked to flex their wrists at a moment of their choosing while watching a clock. Electrodes measured their brain activity. The results were shattering. The readiness potential and unconscious buildup of neural activity spiked, hundreds of milliseconds before the subjects reported their conscious decision to move. The decision was already made before awareness arrived. Conscious choice lagged behind the brain's preparation. You do not choose to act. You become aware of the choice after the brain has already set it in motion. Later studies, with more precise measurements, extended this gap even further, several seconds of unconscious brain activity, predicting a decision before the subject became aware of it. The I that believes it is choosing is an afterthought, a narrator claiming ownership of actions it did not initiate. You are not the author of your choices. You are the witness of them. Philosophy anticipated this collapse. Spinoza wrote that men believe themselves free because they are conscious of their actions, but ignorant of the causes that determine them. Modern neuroscience only confirms his bleak insight. Your choices arise from causes you cannot see: genetic predispositions, environmental pressures, unconscious processing. You experience the surface, not the machinery beneath. Think about the last time you made a free choice. What did you eat for breakfast? Did you believe you could have chosen otherwise? But trace the chain. Your hunger shaped by hormones, your preferences shaped by culture, your pantry shaped by economic circumstance. At every point, causes accumulate, narrowing what you can do until only one option remains. You feel freedom because you do not see the chains. The illusion of freedom is strongest in moral decisions. You condemn others for their choices, believing they could have acted differently. But if every decision is the sum of biology and environment, then no one could have acted otherwise. The murderer, the saint, the addict, the hero, all are expressions of circumstances they did not create. Choice is only necessity wearing a mask, and yet the illusion persists because it is adaptive. Believing in free will allow societies to punish and reward, to enforce order, to sustain cooperation. The myth of freedom is useful, but usefulness is not truth. Truth is colder. You are not free. You are a puppet whose strings are invisible only because they run through you. Consider the uncanny evidence of predictive neuroscience. In some experiments, computers can forecast a subject's decisions seconds before they become aware of deciding. Your brain reveals itself in patterns that others can read before you know yourself. If a machine can predict your choice, then where is freedom? Choice cannot be free if it is predictable. Even randomness does not save you. You may imagine injecting chance into your decisions, flipping a coin, acting unpredictably. But randomness is not freedom. Randomness is chaos without control. A coin toss may decide for you, but that does not restore authorship. At best, it erases it, and so the self collapses further. If your actions are caused, if your choices are predictable, if your freedom is illusion, then who are you? A machine running programs written by evolution, culture, and circumstance. A system of inputs and outputs, mistaking its own ignorance for liberty. Think of the horror embedded in this. When you look back on your life and believe you shaped it, you are lying to yourself. The relationships you entered, the mistakes you made, the paths you took, all of it was determined. You could not have done otherwise. You are replaying a script already written, convinced you are improvising. And if that is true, then punishment and praise are meaningless. There is no guilt, no pride, only inevitability. But society cannot face this truth, so it preserves the illusion at all costs. You are told you are free because the machinery of order depends on your belief in the lie. So look closely now. Remember your last decision. Remember how it felt to choose. Remember the sensation of freedom. And then answer. If your brain prepared the choice before you were aware, then who exactly is it that you believe is choosing? You believe words give you mastery over the world. You name things, tree, sky, love, self, and imagine that naming secures them, makes them real. You imagine that language is a transparent window onto reality, that when you speak, you point directly at truth. But language is not a window. It is a cage. It traps, distorts, simplifies, and forces you into categories that reality itself does not obey. Begin with the simple fact that no word is the thing it names. The word water is not wet. The word fire does not burn. The word love does not ache. Words are symbols, arbitrary sounds tied to meanings by collective agreement. Yet you live as though the words themselves carry essence. You confuse the map for the territory, the symbol for the real. Alfred Korzybski warned, the map is not the territory, but you rarely remember this, and most of your life is spent wandering through maps, never touching the ground they claim to describe. Language shapes perception in ways you cannot escape. Different cultures divide the spectrum of color differently. Some languages have no distinct word for blue and green. Others have dozens of words for what English simply calls snow. Speakers of these languages literally perceive the world differently because perception is filtered through linguistic categories. You think you see reality, but you are seeing what your language allows you to see. Where language has no word, you are blind. Even your concept of self is linguistically constructed. The word I suggests a stable subject, an entity that persists through time. But when you strip the word away, what remains? A flux of sensations, thoughts, and perceptions. The unity you feel as I is reinforced every time you say the word, every time language binds you into a narrative. The self exists largely because you speak it into existence. Language not only shapes perception, it distorts memory. Experiments by Elizabeth Loftus showed that the way a question is phrased alters what people remember. Ask witnesses how fast cars were going when they hit each other, and they give lower estimates than when asked how fast they were going when they smashed. Change the word, change the memory. Words rewrite the past as surely as they describe the present. And what of concepts like justice, freedom, identity, truth? These words appear solid, but they dissolve under scrutiny. Ask 100 people to define justice, and you will receive 100 incompatible definitions. Yet societies are built on these fragile abstractions. Wars are fought, lives destroyed, not over reality itself, but over the meanings of words. You are trapped in conflicts generated by linguistic illusions. Philosophers saw this danger. Ludwig Wittgenstein argued that the limits of your language are the limits of your world. What you cannot describe, you cannot think. And yet reality exceeds language at every turn. There are experiences, pain, ecstasy, terror that language fails to capture. You stumble with metaphors, approximate with analogies, but the experience itself remains unspeakable. The most important dimensions of existence cannot be said, and yet you insist on living as though only what can be said is real. Language also deceives by forcing binaries where none exist. You are taught to divide the world into yes, no, true, false, self-other. But reality is not binary. It is gradient, continuous, uncertain. The structure of language imposes artificial clarity, slicing a seamless reality into categories that mislead. You believe in opposites, life and death, good and evil, freedom and slavery, because language compels you to. The categories feel natural, but they are artificial divisions. Even silence is captured by language. When you say nothing, you still think in words. Your inner monologue rarely stops. From waking to sleep, you narrate, label, interpret. You never encounter reality raw. You encounter it only as language. Your thoughts are imprisoned in a script you did not write, a dictionary inherited before you were born. You speak because language speaks you. Think of this horror. Without language, you would not know what you are. You would not know what a human is, or a world, or a self. You would experience sensations, impulses, perceptions, but without names. They would not cohere. Language stitched them into coherence, but in doing so, it also imprisoned them in categories. You do not know reality. You only know what language permits. And so your entire life has been lived inside words. Inside grammar, inside categories, inside illusions that bind perception, memory, and thought. You think you are free when you speak, but every word is a shackle. You think you are describing truth, but you are only rearranging symbols in a closed system. So I ask you, if every thought you have, every memory you recall, every self you believe in is shaped and caged by language, then when you speak the word I, who or what are you really naming? You believe history anchors you. You imagine a chain stretching backward, linking you to ancestors, nations, civilizations, epochs. You think history explains the present, that it secures your place in a vast unfolding narrative. You are told stories of progress, of decline, of cycles that repeat. But history is not the past. History is the story told about the past, and stories are never neutral. What you call history is a reconstruction, fragile, selective, and often false. Consider first the obvious. Most of human experience is unrecorded. Billions of lives have passed without leaving a trace. What survives are fragments, bones, pottery shards, inscriptions, manuscripts. Archaeology is excavation not of truth, but of debris. Historians stitch together meaning from scattered remnants, but the vast majority of the past is forever gone. You imagine history as a complete tapestry, but it is more like a rotting net, holes gaping where most of reality has vanished. Even the fragments that remain are unstable. Documents are written from perspective, often by the powerful. Chronicles of war are told by victors. Defeats are minimized, atrocities erased. Entire cultures were annihilated without leaving records of their own voices. What you inherit as history is already propaganda, written to preserve the interests of those who survived. You mistake this distortion for truth. Take the example of Herodotus, called the father of history. His accounts of ancient wars are filled with hearsay, invention, and myth, yet they became authoritative. Or consider medieval chronicles, where comets and eclipses were recorded as divine omens, shaping how events were remembered. Even in modern times, government records omit, censor, and distort. The past that reaches you is already filtered through agendas. History is not memory, it is narrative. Memory itself is unreliable, as you have already seen. And collective memory is no better. Nations construct myths about their founding, their heroes, their enemies. These myths are repeated in textbooks, ceremonies, and monuments until they are indistinguishable from fact. The truth of history is often only the consensus of a group repeating the same story. Collective hallucination elevated into reality. Consider the phenomenon of presentism, the tendency to rewrite the past in the image of the present. You read history through today's categories: nation, race, gender, economy, even when those categories did not exist in the same way for those who lived it. You impose your concepts on them, distorting them. You cannot escape this distortion, because you cannot escape your own perspective. And then there are the gaps no one can fill. The collapse of the Indus Valley civilization, the fate of the Mayans, the disappearance of Roanoke. These mysteries expose the fragility of history. Whole cultures vanish into silence, their stories irretrievable. You tell yourself the past is secure, but it dissolves constantly, lost to time, leaving only questions without answers. Even when evidence survives, interpretation changes. Historians once described the Middle Ages as a stagnant, dark age. Later, revisionists emphasized continuity, nuance, complexity. Which version is true? Neither. Both. History is rewritten with every generation, reflecting new concerns, new values. The past is not stable, it mutates to serve the present. Worse still, history can be deliberately falsified. Regimes erase enemies from photographs, rewrite textbooks, destroy records. George Orwell imagined this in 1984. He who controls the past controls the future. But it is not only fiction. Stalin had rivals airbrushed from images. States curate archives to produce desired narratives. Your sense of history may be nothing more than carefully engineered illusion. And what about your personal history? You think you know your own past, but your memories are distorted, and the stories you tell about yourself are edited. Families do the same. They suppress shame, embellish achievement, rewrite events to protect reputations. Just as nations rewrite their histories, so do individuals. The past is always being revised, always unstable. So when you say, history teaches us, what do you mean? Which version of history? Whose story? What if the lessons of history are simply reflections of the present projected backward? What if the past teaches nothing, because it is nothing more than shifting narrative? The most devastating truth is this: The past itself is irretrievable. It is gone, dissolved into dust, atoms scattered beyond recovery. All you have are stories, fragile human attempts to stitch coherence into absence. History is not the past. It is a hallucination of continuity in a universe where continuity does not exist. So the question presses in on you. If history is only a story told on sand, rewritten endlessly by liars and survivors, then what is it you mean when you say, this is what really happened? You rely on logic to steady yourself. When memory falters, perception deceives, language distorts, and history erases, you cling to reason as the last safeguard. Logic feels unshakable, a framework immune to collapse. But logic, too, breaks. The mind that built it cannot escape the traps it sets. Paradox waits at the edges of thought, splitting certainty into fragments that can never be reconciled. Consider Zeno's paradoxes, articulated more than 2,000 years ago. To walk across a room, you must first cover half the distance, then half of what remains, and so on into infinity. By this reasoning, you can never reach the other side. Yet you do. Motion is undeniable, but the logic of infinite division makes it impossible. Physics resolves it with limits and calculus, but the paradox remains. The world both moves and cannot move. Reality fractures under scrutiny. Take the liar's paradox. This statement is false. If it is true, then it is false. If it is false, then it is true. Logic devours itself. A single sentence collapses the foundation of truth, revealing that the binary of true and false may not hold. The paradox is not a trick. It is a wound in the fabric of logic itself. Gödel deepened the wound in the 20th century. His incompleteness theorems prove that any sufficiently powerful logical system contains true statements that cannot be proven within the system. No matter how you construct the framework, there will always be truths beyond its reach. Logic cannot be complete. Certainty is impossible. The very structure of mathematics, the language of physics, is built on this instability. Think of Schrodinger's cat, the quantum paradox. A cat sealed in a box is both alive and dead until observed. The logic of classical reality collapses. The cat inhabits a superposition of contradictory states. Observation resolves it, but what is observation? Why should the presence of awareness determine reality? You live in a universe where contradiction exists at the foundation, hidden only by probability. Paradox is not confined to abstractions. It infects your daily life. Take identity. You are not the same person you were 10 years ago. Cells have been replaced, memories altered, personality shifted. Yet you insist you are continuous. Which is true? Both? Neither? The paradox of identity cannot be resolved. You are both the same and not the same. Consider the ship of Theseus. Replace each plank of a ship over time until none of the original remains. Is it still the same ship? If you gather the discarded planks and rebuild them, which ship is Theseus's? The paradox is not about ships, it is about you. If every cell in your body is replaced, are you still you? If not, then who is reading these words? Infinity deepens the fracture. Imagine Hilbert's hotel with infinitely many rooms, all occupied. A new guest arrives, and somehow there is room shift each guest to the next room, and vacancy appears. Infinity allows impossibility. Add more infinities, and logic itself dissolves. Infinity is not a number. It is a rupture, a reminder that reality slips out of the nets you cast around it. Even the paradox of free will returns here. If all is determined, choice is impossible. If randomness rules, choice is meaningless. You are trapped between determinism and chaos, with no space left for freedom. The paradox is inescapable. And then there is the paradox of self-reference. The brain studies itself. Consciousness observes consciousness. Logic judges logic. You are trapped in recursion, like mirrors facing each other, reflections spiraling into infinity. Each level seems to contain truth, yet each depends on the level above. There is no foundation, only infinite regress. You crave resolution, but paradox denies it. You want the world to be coherent, but it is not. It is fractured, contradictory, recursive. You live inside paradox, and the best you can do is forget it long enough to function. But the paradoxes remain, whispering that logic itself cannot save you. They show you the edges of thought, where certainty collapses. And so you must ask, if logic is fractured, if paradox is inescapable, then what does it mean when you call something true? You live as if the world is finite. You measure distance, count years, assign numbers, confident that everything has limits. Your body has edges. Your life has a span. The universe has a size. But infinity waits at every corner, shattering the illusion of containment. Once you let infinity in, every certainty unravels. Infinity is not a number you can hold. It is an abyss. Consider the set of natural numbers. 1, 2, 3, onward without end. There is no largest number. No matter how far you count, there is always more. Infinity is not vastness. It is endlessness. And endlessness has no shape, no closure. Your mind cannot contain it, yet mathematics is built upon it. Every equation that assumes, and so on forever, invokes infinity, and every invocation fractures logic. Georg Cantor exposed the horror most directly. He showed that some infinities are larger than others. The set of whole numbers is infinite, but the set of real numbers, the decimals stretching between them, is even more infinite. Between any two numbers lies an infinite continuum. Infinity nests within infinity, hierarchies without end. Your intuition collapses here, because how can something already without end be smaller than something else without end? Cantor himself was driven into despair by the implications, as if his own discoveries devoured him. Now consider Hilbert's hotel, that impossible thought experiment. A hotel with infinitely many rooms, all occupied. A new guest arrives impossible in a finite world. But shift every guest from room n to room n+1, and room 1 becomes free. The hotel, though full, has space. Add an infinite busload of guests, still no problem. Infinity absorbs all arrivals, never exhausted. This is not intuition. This is absurdity turned real by logic. And yet, the equations of physics rely on infinities every day. Infinity infects space itself. Look into the night sky. The observable universe may be finite, but what lies beyond cannot be measured. If space is infinite, then every possible configuration of matter exists somewhere. Not just stars and galaxies, but exact copies of you living parallel lives. An infinite universe guarantees repetition, because within endlessness, all arrangements occur. Somewhere, you are reading these same words, again and again, with only the smallest variations. Infinity erases uniqueness. Even if the universe itself is finite, time may not be. Cosmology offers the possibility of eternal recurrence, that the universe expands, collapses, and begins again, endlessly repeating. In infinite time, every arrangement of matter, every history, every life reappears. You will live again. You will die again. You will read this sentence again. And you will forget that you already have. Mathematics reveals stranger infinities still. Fractals like the Mandelbrot set contain endless detail. Zoom in forever, and new patterns unfold, never repeating, never ending. Infinity resides within the finite, concealed inside the boundaries you think are solid. The leaf, the coastline, the veins in your hand, fractals everywhere. Infinite complexity inside apparent simplicity. Infinity is not only out there, in the vast cosmos, it is inside you, beneath your skin. But infinity does worse than distort space and time. It destroys meaning. If every possible outcome occurs somewhere in infinite reality, then nothing is special. Every victory, every tragedy, every choice is repeated endlessly. Your uniqueness dissolves. Free will dissolves. Morality dissolves. For in infinite time and space, all that can happen does happen endlessly. Even your most secret thought is already being thought, right now, by someone else in some unreachable corner of infinity. And still infinity presses deeper. In quantum mechanics, probabilities ripple across infinite possibilities until collapsed by observation. In multiverse theories, every possible outcome of every quantum event exists in parallel. Infinity multiplies infinitely. Entire universes blossoming from every particle's uncertainty. Reality becomes a foam of infinities, beyond comprehension, beyond containment. Your mind revolts against this, tries to shrink infinity into metaphor, into symbol, into poetry. But mathematics insists it is real. Physics insists it is real. Infinity underpins the equations that describe your world. You cannot escape it, even if you cannot grasp it. And so the boundaries you trusted, the size of the world, the uniqueness of yourself, the finality of your choices erode under infinity's weight. You live inside a reality that offers no limits, no closure, no escape. So I ask you, if infinity guarantees that every thought you think, every action you take, every life you live is already repeated endlessly, then what does it mean to live this one at all? You imagine yourself as a single, coherent being. You say, I, and in that syllable, you compress memory, perception, body, consciousness, history, choice. You assume there is one person behind your eyes, one identity threading through your years. But what you call self is not singular. It is a hall of mirrors, reflections endlessly folded back on themselves, each insisting it is the original. The more closely you look, the more the self fractures into illusions. Begin with psychology's recognition that the mind is modular. Different systems in your brain govern different functions: language, vision, motor control, emotion, planning. These systems compete, override, contradict. What you feel as a unified stream of thought is an after effect, a story constructed from multiple voices. You are less a single mind than a committee, and the committee hides its divisions behind the mask of I. The split brain experiments laid this bare. When the corpus callosum, the bridge between hemispheres, was severed, each hemisphere functioned independently. One hand buttoned a shirt while the other unbuttoned it. One hemisphere knew information, the other did not. Yet when questioned, the speaking hemisphere invented explanations, fabricating unity where none existed. What you call a self is a cover-up, a fragile narrative pasted over disunity. Even in an intact brain, competing selves surface. Consider dissociative identity disorder, where multiple personalities alternate control, each with its own memories, voices, handwriting. These are not ghosts possessing a body. They are fragments of self that have lost the illusion of unity. But the condition only dramatizes what is true of all minds. Identity is already plural, already fractured. Your sense of continuity is also deceptive. You believe you are the same person across time, but as Heraclitus warned, you cannot step into the same river twice. Memory alters, body changes, personality shifts. The child you were no longer exists. Yet you weave a story to pretend otherwise, calling the story me. Derek Parfit argued that personal identity is not a fact, but a fiction, a psychological continuity that can thin until it disappears entirely. If your memories were transferred into another body, would that be you? If your brain were copied, would both be you? The thought experiments reveal the fragility of the self. And what of neuroscience's quiet discovery that the sense of self arises in the default mode network, a specific pattern of brain activity? When this network quiets, under meditation or psychedelics, the self dissolves. Experience remains sights, sounds, sensations, but without an owner. The world happens, but not to anyone. This state of ego dissolution shows that the self is not fundamental. It is an optional construction. Remove the network, remove the I. Even simpler illusions prove this. In the rubber hand experiment, a fake hand stroked in synchrony with your hidden real hand becomes part of your body. You feel the fake is yours. The sense of bodily self is negotiable. Extend this. If you can feel ownership of a rubber hand, what prevents you from feeling ownership of an entire false body, or even a false identity? The boundaries of self are pliable, shifting with circumstance. Consider how memory manipulates the self. Every time you recall your past, you rewrite it. Each recall subtly alters details, aligning them with present beliefs. The self you think you carry is already distorted, each layer edited by the act of remembering. Your identity is not an archive, but a palimpsest, rewritten so often that the original cannot be recovered. Language amplifies the illusion. The constant use of I convinces you of a stable subject. But the word does not point to a thing. It points to a narrative placeholder, a symbol of continuity. Remove the word, and what remains is not a self, but a flux of sensations and processes. The I exists only because you say, it does not now consider technology's assault on selfhood. With brain scans, computers can predict decisions seconds before you are aware of them. If a machine can read your choices before you know them, then where is yourself? It exists only as a delayed commentary, not as the author. Soon, artificial intelligence may reconstruct identities from data traces, creating digital replicas indistinguishable from you. If such a replica can think and act as you do, does it share yourself? Or are there now two of you, or neither? The self is also porous to others. Mirror neurons make you feel the pain of someone else's wound, the joy of their laughter. Boundaries blur. Where do you end, then another begin? If you absorb others' emotions, internalize their language, inherit their memories through stories, then the self is never isolated. It is collective, entangled, shared dot, and if the self is fractured, plural, rewritten, porous, and optional, what then? The one who says I is only a voice among voices, a narrator smoothing over chaos. There is no indivisible core. There is only a performance, endlessly rehearsed dot. So the question becomes this: if the I that you protect and defend has never existed as a singular thing, then who exactly is the one afraid of disappearing? You walk through the world believing your thoughts are yours. You imagine that the voice in your head, the stream of ideas, desires, and decisions, belongs to you, that it is authored by some inner self directing the course of your mind. But the closer you look, the more you see that thought itself is not chosen, not authored, not yours. Thoughts arrive unbidden, like weather passing through the sky. They appear, linger, dissolve. You do not summon them. You only notice them. Consider your own experience. Can you predict your next thought? Can you decide in advance what you will think 5 seconds from now? You may try, but the act of deciding is itself a thought that arises. The thought of predicting was not predicted. It arrived as all thoughts do unsummoned. What you call your will is only the noticing of thoughts that have already arrived. Psychology and neuroscience confirm this unsettling fact. Studies using brain scans reveal patterns of neural activity that predict choices seconds before participants become consciously aware of deciding. Your brain knows before you know. Consciousness lags behind, narrating decisions already made. The voice of choice is not a commander, but a commentator. Obsessive thoughts make a loss of control undeniable. People trapped in obsessive-compulsive disorder experience intrusive thoughts that repeat endlessly, commanding rituals, demanding action. They cannot silence the thoughts by willpower, because will itself is not separate from thought. In depression, thoughts turn against the self, repeating messages of worthlessness that the sufferer cannot disown. If thoughts were truly yours, could you not simply stop them? The fact that you cannot proves that you are not their author. Meditation traditions have said this for centuries. The mind is a restless sea, thoughts rising and falling like waves. When you try to stop thinking, you only discover how little control you have. The attempt itself becomes another thought, another ripple. You can watch thoughts come and go, but you cannot stop the tide. You are the witness, not the maker. Worse still, many of your thoughts are not even original. They are inherited, absorbed, implanted. You repeat phrases you heard from parents, teachers, media. Your desires are shaped by advertising, your beliefs by culture, your opinions by the people around you. What you take to be your thought is often the echo of someone else's voice, internalized and mistaken for your own. How much of what you think has ever truly been yours? The unconscious mind drives even deeper. Freud was right, at least in this. Much of your mental life is hidden. Desires you deny, fears you repress, motives you cannot admit, all shape your behavior without entering consciousness. Dreams betray them. Slips of the tongue reveal them. Symptoms embody them. You are steered by forces you cannot see, yet you believe you are in control. Cognitive psychology adds another layer of betrayal: biases. You believe you think rationally, but your mind is riddled with systematic errors, confirmation bias, anchoring bias, availability bias. You are not a thinker, but a pattern of predictable distortions. Your thoughts mislead you again and again, and you rarely notice. Even when you do, you cannot prevent it. Awareness does not erase bias. Consider also the phenomenon of mind-wandering. Studies show that up to half of your waking life is spent in thoughts unrelated to the present moment. You are absent, drifting, lost in daydreams and memories. The mind escapes your control, wandering where it will, while you pretend to steer it. But the steering wheel is not connected. The car drives itself. Even language betrays you. Try to think without words. Try to silence the internal narrator. You cannot. The words keep coming, shaping and distorting what you think. Language thinks you, not the other way around. And then there is the horror of intrusive thoughts, the sudden image of violence, the urge to leap from a high place, the thought of harm to someone you love. These thoughts appear uninvited, shocking, alien. You recoil, insisting they are not yours, but they arise from your own mind. If you cannot stop them, and if they feel foreign, then what does yours even mean? You may comfort yourself with the idea that at least you can choose how to respond to thoughts. But even responses are thoughts, arriving unbidden. The thought of resisting is just another thought. The thought of acceptance is another. There is no vantage point outside thought from which to control it. You are inside the storm, not above it. So what are you, if not the author of thought? You are the theater in which thoughts appear, but not the playwright. You are the echo chamber, not the voice. The self you defend as thinker is only the shadow cast by thought as it passes. If your thoughts are not yours, if they are automatic, inherited, intrusive, uncontrollable, then tell me, who exactly do you think is thinking you? You live under the illusion that you are awake, alert, conscious of your choices and your actions. You believe that consciousness is the driver, the decision maker, the essence of who you are. But the truth is more disorienting. Most of what you do, think, and feel is not under conscious control. The unconscious governs your life, while consciousness lingers behind like a spectator, watching events unfold and pretending to command them. Consider the scale of unconscious influence. Every second, your senses receive millions of bits of information: light, sound, touch, chemical signals. Yet consciousness can process only a tiny fraction. The rest is filtered, interpreted, acted upon without your awareness. The majority of reality never even reaches you. What you experience as the world is only the thinnest slice of what your body already knows. Habits make the unconscious visible. You tie your shoes, drive a car, type on a keyboard without thinking. Entire sequences unfold automatically, freed from awareness. Once learned, the unconscious takes over. Consciousness would be too slow, too clumsy to manage them. You live most of your daily life in this autopilot, yet you tell yourself you are choosing every step. The unconscious also shapes desire. You believe you want things for reasons you can explain: status, pleasure, love. But psychoanalysis insists otherwise. Freud argued that hidden drives, sexual, aggressive, repressed, animate your choices. Modern psychology has replaced Freud's specifics with different models, but the conclusion remains: your motives are not transparent to you. Studies show that people make decisions influenced by unconscious priming, subliminal cues, background words, images glimpsed too quickly to register consciously. You think you know why you act, but your explanations are after-the-fact stories. Consider the famous invisible gorilla experiment. Participants asked to count basketball passes often failed to notice a man in a gorilla suit walking across the scene. Their eyes saw it, but their consciousness ignored it. Attention is narrow, selective, and the unconscious decides what enters it. You see only what your brain allows you to see. Dreams reveal the unconscious most nakedly. Each night, your brain weaves narratives without your control, vivid and bizarre, filled with symbols and fears. You wake and dismiss them, but they show you that beneath the conscious mind lies an unrestrained sea. Even when you sleep, the unconscious continues, restless, irrepressible. The unconscious is not only irrational, it is skilled. Studies of expert intuition show that unconscious processing can solve problems faster and more accurately than conscious deliberation. Chess masters recognize patterns instantly. Doctors diagnose in moments without being able to explain how. Their unconscious has absorbed patterns beyond conscious articulation. You mistake this for magic, for instinct, but it is machinery operating beneath awareness. Yet the unconscious is not always benevolent. It can betray you. Implicit biases, racism, sexism, prejudice lurk beneath awareness, shaping judgments you would consciously reject. You swear you are fair, but your unconscious reveals otherwise in split-second reactions. In micro-decisions you cannot control. Your morality is compromised not by what you think, but by what you do not know you think. Even memory is not safe from unconscious editing. When you recall the past, the unconscious fills in gaps, invents details, reshapes events to fit present beliefs. You sincerely believe the reconstruction, unaware of the edits. Your past is not only fragile, it is rewritten by processes you never see. Neurology exposes the deepest horror. The unconscious can act without awareness altogether. Patients with blind sight navigate obstacles despite insisting they cannot see. Their unconscious processes visual information accurately, but consciousness remains blind. The body acts correctly, while the mind insists it cannot. The unconscious is the true agent. Consciousness is the commentator. And then there are cases of automatism. People committing complex acts in states of sleepwalking or dissociation. Driving cars, cooking meals, even committing crimes without conscious awareness. These events prove that consciousness is not required for action at all. Life continues in its absence. Think about this. When you speak, words often tumble out before you plan them. You hear, what you are saying at the same time others do. The unconscious assembles language, and you, the supposed speaker, discover the sentence only after it has already been formed. Are you speaking, or is speaking happening through you? If the unconscious steers, then consciousness is not the driver. It is the passenger, watching the landscape of thoughts, feelings, and actions unfold, claiming ownership only afterward. You tell yourself, I did this, but it was done before you knew dot. So what does that make you? You are not the thinker of thoughts, not the controller of choices, not even the true perceiver of the world. You are the narrative your unconscious feeds itself, a shadow trailing behind processes you cannot touch. And so the question presses down on you. If consciousness is only the illusion of control, then who is it that you think is living your life? Each night, you surrender to unconsciousness. You close your eyes, the world disappears, and a new one emerges. In dreams, logic dissolves. Time fractures. Identities shift. The dead return, landscapes distort, rules collapse. You accept impossibilities without question flying, speaking with the dead, existing in multiple places at once. And only upon waking do you realize how absurd it was. But the realization is hollow, because you never questioned it while inside. The dream world proves how easily your mind accepts unreality as real. This is the first lesson of dreaming. Consciousness cannot distinguish truth from illusion. You trust waking life because it feels coherent, but dreams felt coherent too, until they ended. How can you be sure this waking moment is not another dream, destined to be dismissed later? Descartes himself feared this, asking, if dreams can mimic waking life perfectly, what grounds do you have for believing you are awake now? None. You rely on continuity, on consistency, but dreams provide both until they vanish. Lucid dreams sharpen the paradox. In them, the dreamer becomes aware that they are dreaming and can alter events at will. Entire worlds shaped by thought, entire narratives bent by desire. The lucid dream reveals consciousness as a creative engine, generating convincing realities from within. If your mind can create worlds indistinguishable from waking life in sleep, what prevents waking life from being just another construct, another simulation generated by a deeper mind? Neuroscience shows how fragile the boundary truly is. Dreams emerge from the brainstem, from chaotic firings woven by the cortex into narratives. They are biological noise mistaken for experience. But waking perception is built the same way signals from the senses are noisy, incomplete, and the brain stitches them into coherent stories. Dreaming is not separate from waking. It is a variation of the same process. Both are constructions. Both are hallucinations. The only difference is that waking hallucinations are stabilized by external input. Psychology reveals more. Nightmares, recurring dreams, symbolic dreams all show the influence of unconscious fears and desires. The dream is not random. It is a mirror of what you deny in waking life. Jung called dreams the theater of the unconscious, staging archetypes and conflicts. Whether or not you accept his interpretation, the fact remains. Your dreams expose you to yourself in ways waking consciousness cannot control. And yet, you forget most dreams within minutes of waking. Entire worlds vanish, erased without trace. You spend 1/3 of your life in this state, yet you cannot recall it. That means for 1/3 of your existence, you are absent even to yourself. And when you remember, what you recall is fragmented, distorted, rewritten. Just as memory lies in waking life, so too does memory of dreams. Your life is riddled with black holes of unremembered existence. Blurring of dream and reality has haunted cultures throughout history. Ancient Greeks believed dreams were messages from the gods. Some indigenous cultures treated dreams as real experiences, equal to waking life. Today, neuroscientists dismiss dreams as neural noise, while psychoanalysts still mine them for hidden meaning. But whichever interpretation you choose, the fact remains. Dreams cannot be cleanly separated from waking. Both are realities constructed in the same machinery dot. And what of those moments when the boundary collapses? Sleep paralysis? Hypnagogic hallucinations? You wake but cannot move. Figures loom in the dark. Voices whisper. Terror floods you because you cannot distinguish whether it is dream or reality. This state exposes the fragility of the line. The mind slips and reality itself becomes untrustworthy. The same fragility appears in waking hallucinations, induced by psychedelics or illness. Under LSD, boundaries dissolve, colors intensify, time fractures. Under schizophrenia, voices speak with conviction. These states mimic dreaming, and yet they occur while awake. Again, the question returns, what is the difference? If both are hallucinations, then what you call real may be just another dream with better consensus. Philosophy offers no escape. The Chinese philosopher Zhuangzi dreamt he was a butterfly. Upon waking, he asked, was he a man who dreamt he was a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming he was a man? The question cannot be resolved because both states felt real. Your own life cannot escape this uncertainty. You may wake tomorrow into a deeper state and dismiss this world as dream. And who could prove otherwise? Even science cannot anchor you. Brain scans can map dream states, track neural activity, correlate REM cycles with narratives. But they cannot prove that waking life is not itself another level of dreaming. For every measurement depends on perception, and perception itself is already a construction. Science describes the dream from within the dream. Dreams expose the most devastating truth. Your grip on reality is weaker than you believe. You cannot trust the coherence of waking life because coherence can be manufactured. You cannot trust memory because memory erases. You cannot trust perception because perception hallucinates. Dreams prove that your mind can create convincing realities and then erase them without trace. So ask yourself, if you can never be certain whether you are awake or dreaming, then how can you ever be certain that this life is not just another dream waiting to dissolve? You comfort yourself with the belief that you matter, that somewhere in the vastness of the universe, your life has weight, your choice is significance, your existence a place in some greater order. You tell yourself that consciousness gives the cosmos meaning, that your awareness lights up reality. But the universe does not need you. It has never needed you. Look at the scale of things. The Earth, which feels infinite beneath your feet, is a speck in the solar system. The solar system itself is a grain of dust within the Milky Way. The Milky Way is one galaxy among hundreds of billions in the observable universe. Beyond that, there may be infinite more. Against such immensity, your entire life, your fears, your loves, your struggles, shrinks into irrelevance. The cosmos does not notice you. It will not pause when you die. The history of the universe is even crueler. For 13.8 billion years, stars formed, galaxies collided, black holes devoured light. For almost all of that time, you did not exist. You will not exist for almost all the time yet to come. Humanity itself is a recent accident, appearing at the last possible instant of cosmic history. If the universe were a year old, humans would appear in the last few seconds before midnight on December 31st. You live inside a blink, and you mistake it for eternity. Life itself is fragile against cosmic indifference. Earth's biosphere has been nearly annihilated multiple times. Asteroid impacts, supervolcanoes, mass extinctions. Each time, species vanished forever, replaced by others. 99% of all organisms that have ever lived are extinct. Why should you or your kind be any different? The planet does not care. The universe does not grieve. And even Earth will not remain. The sun will swell into a red giant, scorching the planet, then collapse into a white dwarf. The oceans will boil away, the atmosphere will burn, the crust will melt. Long before that, rising entropy will destabilize climates, starve ecosystems, erase civilizations. No trace of you will remain. The universe itself tends toward dissolution. The second law of thermodynamics dictates that entropy increases, that order collapses into disorder. Stars burn out, energy disperses, structures decay. In the far future, galaxies will fade, black holes will evaporate, and the universe will approach heat death, a uniform void where nothing happens because nothing can happen. Against that fate, your existence is less than a flicker. Some argue that consciousness gives meaning to the cosmos, that without awareness, the universe would be empty. But awareness is not central. It is accidental. Most of the universe is barren, lifeless, indifferent. The laws of physics do not require you. They unfold whether or not you exist. If all humanity vanished tomorrow, the stars would still burn, galaxies would still spin, black holes would still consume. Even evolution, the process that created you, is indifferent. It does not select for truth, only survival. It shapes organisms that can replicate, not organisms that can understand. You exist not because the universe sought you, but because random variations happen to persist. You are an accident of accidents, strung together by chance. And what of human achievements, art, science, culture? You may believe they grant permanence, that they resist oblivion. But civilizations crumble, languages die, monuments erode. The pyramids will dissolve. The books you cherish will decay. The digital archives you build will vanish when the machines fail. Everything you call meaning is temporary scaffolding, destined for collapse. Even the idea of legacy falters. You tell yourself you live on in memory, in influence. But memory is unreliable, as you know. Within a few generations, your name will be forgotten. Within millennia, your species may be gone. Legacy is only a way of denying mortality. It changes nothing about the indifference of the cosmos. Religion once tried to shield you from this truth, promising that humans were the center of creation, that gods watched and cared, that eternity awaited. But astronomy, biology, and physics have stripped those illusions away. You are not central. You are not eternal. You are not necessary. You are an accident passing through an uncaring abyss. And yet you still insist on significance. You still demand that your suffering matters, that your joy matters, that your awareness is special. But the universe does not hear you. Its silence is infinite. Its indifference is perfect. So face it now. If the universe does not need you, if your existence changes nothing, if everything you are will vanish into entropy, then what do you mean when you say your life matters at all? You think your life follows a plot. Seeds planted bear fruit, effort earns reward, cause produces effect. You tell a tidy story where meaning and intention thread events together, your choices knitting consequence into a fabric called destiny. But step away from the story and look at the blind arithmetic underneath it. Chance. At every level, molecular, biological, social, cosmic randomness dictates outcomes far more than intention ever will. Your life is less a novel and more a roll of loaded dice, with meaning pasted over the results after the roll has already landed. Start in biology, where randomness is baked into the very mechanism of inheritance. Mutations occur without moral sense, without purpose. They are copying errors, chemical slips during DNA replication, radiation-induced breaks, mismatches introduced by enzymes. Some mutations are beneficial, most are neutral, many are harmful. Natural selection then acts on the variation it did not will. Evolution is not a benevolent craftsman sculpting organisms to suit a plan. It is a blind filter, polishing from a chaotic supply. Genetic drift, random fluctuations in allele frequencies, can fix traits in small populations entirely by accident. The traits you prize in your bloodline could be the product of chance, bottlenecks and founder effects, rather than virtue or design. You are, in part, an evolutionary accident decorated with narrative. Move inward to the neurons. Synaptic connections form and prune largely according to stochastic synaptic activity, chemical gradients, and developmental noise. The pattern of wiring that becomes you is contingent on micro-events in the womb in the first months of life. Tiny fluctuations of neurotransmitter levels, local oxygenation, minor differences in growth signals, a marginally different fetal environment, a slightly altered timing of gene expression, and the trajectory of your personality may have bent in a different direction. The person who laughs at your joke, the partner you meet, the genes that got copied correctly. So much depends on microscopic randomness. Expand outward to the social web. Your birthplace, the family who finds and raises you, the random events that bring people into your life. A train delayed by 5 minutes, a rainstorm that changes a commute, an unplanned conversation in line. These are not the moves of destiny, but the small, stochastic differences that cascade into life-defining outcomes. The economist's concept of path dependence shows how tiny, early divergences amplify over time. The economist's insight, the history is path-dependent, is really the math of randomness wearing a costume of inevitability. Survivorship bias hides the tens of thousands of failed startups, wasted marriages, unpublished books. You see only the successful endpoints and mistake them for evidence of skill. Those who survive are not always the most virtuous or deserved. They are often the luckiest. Think of the lottery of birth. You did not choose the nation, the century, the family, the social class you were born into. That lottery determines the maps of opportunity and constraint, shaping education, health, risk exposure. Societies celebrate merit, but every meritocracy stands on the concealed scaffolding of randomness. A child born in a stable home gets advantages not by moral superiority, but by fortune. The mathematicians who formalize probability, Bayes, Kolmogorov, teach that prior conditions dominate posterior beliefs. In human terms, the prior of your birth often overwhelms whatever posterior you manage to compute with effort. Even within the science of probability, our intuitions are terrible. The gambler's fallacy convinces us that a coin toss is due to change, that a streak implies balancing forces, when reality treats each event as independent. The availability heuristic tricks you into overestimating traumatic events because they are vivid plane crashes, lottery winners, so you rescript randomness as narrative. You attribute intention to what is random because minds are pattern-seeking machines desperate not to be alone with chance. Faces in clouds, conspiracies in coincidences. Your brain will invent meaning to avoid the cold arithmetic of chance. Quantum mechanics gives randomness ontological weight. At the subatomic level, events do not merely appear random because of ignorance. Some processes are genuinely probabilistic. A radioactive atom decays unpredictably. An electron's position is given by a probability distribution. If indeterminacy sits at the foundation of matter, then the universe itself never completed a script. It collapsed onto outcomes according to probabilities. The world you inhabit is one realization among many possible worlds that could have emerged from quantum uncertainty. That you exist at all is the product of a particular realization, a contingency, not inevitability. Cosmology amplifies the gamble. The structure of the universe depends on parameters constants whose values determine whether matter clusters into galaxies or disperses into lifeless gas. The anthropic principle notes that we observe these particular parameter values because, in universes where different values prevail, observers like us would not arise. That's not cosmic purpose. It's selection bias. We can only find ourselves in histories conducive to life. The cosmic constants are not moral telegrams. They are contingencies sampled from a parameter space whose vast majority yields nothing like us. The apparent fine-tuning is less eloquent design than survivorship in a multiverse of outcomes. If such a multiverse exists, probability also humbles our claims to knowledge. Statistical significance is a fragile thing. P-values are misread and abused. Small sample studies produce spurious correlations. Regression to the mean hides causal illusions. We pattern match where there is noise. The replication crisis in psychology and other fields revealed how many supposed discoveries were chance artifacts, p-hacked by experimenters who wanted a story. Science, the noble enterprise of truth-seeking, must constantly guard against false positives, false patterns, born from the randomness of small samples and noisy measurements. What you thought was evidence for meaning often crumbles under larger data, revealing the scaffolding of luck. And the moral weight of this truth pierces deeper. If chance governs so much, praise and blame wobble. How culpable is the accident-prone executive who makes a risky bet that fails? How meritorious the artist celebrated because a critic happened to see them? When lottery and contingency shape outcomes, moral language begins to feel brittle. Our systems of retribution and reward rely on assumptions of control and desert. Expose those assumptions to the calculus of probability, and they look like superstition. We upbraid individuals for outcomes beyond their control and lionize success, often attributable more to random advantage than to virtue. You have spent a lifetime overlaying meaning onto random events to survive intellectually. Ritual, religion, narrative, therapy, each is an effort to disguise chance with intention. You create reasons to sleep better at night. I chose well. I was meant to meet them. This suffering has purpose. But these are stories told after the roll, ex post facto rationalizations that pacify the mind. They do not alter the underlying arithmetic. The horror is intimate. You reading this are the product of improbable chains, of parents meeting when they did, of genes recombining in a particular confluence, of innumerable dice rolled and settling into a configuration that yields you. Change any of 1,000 microscopic events, and you are never born. Your loves, your failures, your triumphs, many rest on the fragile scaffolding of luck, not the sturdy columns of destiny. Yet humans are poor statisticians. We punish randomness as moral failure and worship it as deserved success. We attribute agency where none exists and demand reasons where there are only probabilities. This mismatch is not merely intellectual error. It is existential cruelty. It forces us to feel shame for being unlucky and to take credit for being fortuitous. So here's the final chill you must hold. If chance, not purpose, writes the majority of your life, if the narrative you cling to is an after-the-fact gloss applied to random outcomes, then who is the author of your story? Who do you blame? Whom do you credit? And what meaning remains when the dice have already fallen? You spend your life orbiting death, circling it in avoidance, denying it in ritual, disguising it in euphemism. You say the dead pass away, depart, rest. You build monuments, weave myths, promise afterlives. You treat death as a transition, a doorway, a boundary to another state. But death is not a doorway. It is not an end in the sense of a completed chapter. Death is erasure total, unmaking, deletion. Biology makes this clear. Life is nothing more than a precarious balancing act. Entropy resisted for a time by energy input, order maintained through metabolism. The moment the system fails, oxygen cut off, neurons starved, heart stopped, order collapses. Cells rupture, enzymes digest the body from within, microbes devour tissue. There is no soul rising above. There is only chemistry reverting to equilibrium. Life is not ended, it is undone. You tell yourself that consciousness might survive, that something immaterial lingers. But every shred of evidence ties consciousness to the brain. When the brain is injured, memory disappears. When chemicals shift, mood shifts. When neurons die, identity erodes. There is no experience without tissue. Destroy the tissue, and the voice in your head falls silent. Death is not a passage. It is the cessation of experience altogether. Consider anesthesia. Hours vanish into nothing. Not dream, not void, but absence. You go under, you wake, and you say, I was gone. That nothingness is as close as you have come to death. Multiply it not by hours, but by eternity, and you begin to glimpse the scale of erasure. Death is anesthesia without awakening. Religions promise otherwise, but their contradictions betray them. Eternal life in heaven or hell, reincarnation through endless cycles, dissolution into cosmic oneness. Which is true? They cannot all be. And each is suspiciously tailored to human hopes and fears. Reward for the righteous, punishment for enemies, a second chance for the dissatisfied. Wishful thinking wearing metaphysical clothing. Against them stands the silence of evidence. No one returns. The dead do not write back. Even memory fails as a refuge. You tell yourself you live on in the minds of others, but memory is frail, distorted, temporary. Within decades, your name fades from lips. Within centuries, your existence is dust in archives. Within millennia, no trace of you remains. To be remembered is to delay erasure, not escape it. Philosophers have tried to tame death. Epicurus argued that you should not fear it, because when you are, death is not, and when death is, you are not. But this cold logic comforts little. It is not the state of death that terrifies. It is the erasure of all states, the obliteration of continuity, the deletion of the self that once clung to existence. It is not nothingness itself you fear, but the fact that you will not even know it as nothingness. You will not be there to know at all. Heidegger argued that death gives life meaning, and existence becomes authentic when lived toward death. But authenticity is another mask, a way of pretending that annihilation is a gift. Meaning cannot be extracted from erasure. The truth remains. You are temporary, and death is the deletion of your temporariness. Modern science strips away the last illusions. The second law of thermodynamics ensures that energy disperses, order collapses, systems decay. The body is no exception. Life is entropy defied. Death is entropy fulfilled. And entropy always wins. Worse still, the universe itself is mortal. Stars burn out, galaxies drift apart, black holes evaporate. In the end, whether by heat death, big rip, or collapse, the cosmos itself will erase all memory of itself. If even the universe will be deleted, what hope have you? Death is not a personal event. It is a universal law. And yet you resist it, because resistance is instinct. Organisms survive by avoiding destruction. Your fear of death is not philosophical, it is biological. Your body floods with cortisol at threats. Your mind recoils from the thought of non-existence. Fear itself is proof that death erases, because the organism cannot tolerate imagining its own deletion. So you build stories. You tell yourself you are more than matter, more than time, more than chance. You clutch at immortality through children, through works, through faith. But each collapses. Children die, works decay, faith dissolves. Nothing survives erasura. So now the question presses harder than ever. If death is not a transition, not a passage, but absolute erasure, then what is the point of anything you do, if all of it will vanish without trace? You live as though stability is possible. You build houses to last, carve monuments in stone, archive knowledge in books and servers. You cling to the belief that order can be preserved, that things can endure. But the second law of thermodynamics speaks with a voice louder than all your illusions. Entropy increases. Disorder always rises. Structures dissolve. Systems collapse. Every act of creation is temporary resistance against an inevitable tide. Entropy is not metaphor. It is the measure of how energy disperses, how systems slide from order to chaos. Heat flows from hot to cold, not the reverse. Organized energy dissipates, leaving uniformity. Stars burn out, ice melts, bodies decay. Every moment you live, entropy increases in your cells, in your organs, in your brain. You do not live despite entropy. You live by temporarily holding it at bay, and you will die when you can no longer do so. Even life itself, celebrated as defiance of entropy, is only temporary order purchased by expending more disorder elsewhere. Your body maintains structure by consuming food, converting it into energy, dispersing waste heat into the environment. Every breath, every heartbeat, every thought increases disorder around you. You are a machine of entropy production, a brief island of order fueling the greater tide. Civilizations, too, rise only to fall. Empires accumulate wealth, knowledge, and power, but maintaining them requires ever-increasing energy. Resources deplete, infrastructures decay, corruption spreads. Eventually, the system collapses under its own weight. Rome, Mesopotamia, the Maya all followed entropy's script. Your own civilization is no different. Highways crack, buildings crumble, servers corrode, social order frays. Entropy is not a threat, it is the inevitable future. Even the stars obey. Nuclear fusion turns hydrogen into helium, releasing light and heat. But fuel runs out. Stars collapse into white dwarfs, neutron stars, black holes. Galaxies dim as stellar birth slows. On cosmological scales, entropy ensures that light fades, structures disperse, and the universe approaches thermal equilibrium, a state where no work is possible because energy is evenly distributed. This is heat death, the end of all difference, all structure, all life. Entropy also governs information. A message transmitted through noise degrades. Files corrupt. Languages evolve and lose meaning. Memories fade. The order in your thoughts erodes every time you recall them, each retrieval altering them. Even the story you tell yourself about who you are succumbs to entropy, rewritten until it bears little resemblance to what was. Information, like matter and energy, dissolves into disorder. You think technology might save you, but technology itself obeys entropy. Machines rust, software glitches, data decays. Servers storing your most sacred digital memories are already rotting, vulnerable to cosmic rays, heat, neglect. Even the internet, that vast archive, is temporary. The Library of Alexandria burned once. Its digital descendants will burn again, not by fire, but by entropy. Entropy explains why time feels irreversible. Broken glass does not reassemble. Smoke does not return to firewood. Ashes do not reform into living trees. Physics allows reversibility in theory, but in practice, the improbability is astronomical. Entropy is why you age, why your body weakens, why every system slides toward dissolution. And there is no appeal. No force counters entropy permanently. You can slow it, resist it, even reverse it locally, but only at the cost of increasing it elsewhere. The second law is not negotiable. It is the universe's only commandment, and it decrees collapse. Philosophers tried to make peace with this. Nietzsche spoke of eternal recurrence, everything happening again, forever. But entropy denies even that comfort, because recurrence requires reversibility. In an entropic universe, recurrence is fantasy. What decays will not return. What is erased stays erased. Entropy mocks meaning. You labor to create, but entropy erases. You struggle to preserve, but entropy consumes. You tell yourself stories of permanence, but permanence is illusion. Even the pyramids will dissolve, given enough time. Even black holes will evaporate. Even the universe itself will sink into featureless uniformity. And so entropy is not only a physical law, it is an existential verdict. It says nothing lasts. Not you, not your works, not your species, not your world. All order is temporary resistance, and resistance always fails. So I ask you, if entropy guarantees that everything you build, love, and remember will collapse into disorder, then why do you continue to cling to the illusion of permanence at all? You look up at the night sky and imagine fullness. Stars scattered across the darkness, galaxies glowing faintly, the velvet of heaven spangled with fire. You think the universe is crowded, bursting with brilliance, but this is a trick of scale. Space is not full. It is emptiness, unbroken, immeasurable, and almost perfectly indifferent. Consider the distances. The moon, which seems close enough to touch, is 384,000 kilometers away. Light, traveling at 300,000 kilometers per second, takes over a second to reach it. The sun, the source of all your warmth, is 8 minutes distant. The nearest star system, Proxima Centauri, is 4.2 light years away. Your spacecraft crawl. Even at their fastest, they would take tens of thousands of years to arrive. What you call the cosmos is an abyss, and you are marooned in it. The observable universe contains hundreds of billions of galaxies, each with billions of stars. But between them stretches void. Vast gulfs so wide that entire civilizations could vanish and never be noticed. Galaxies are islands in an ocean of absence, separated by distances too immense to bridge. The sky's brightness deceives you. For every star you see, there are countless cubic light years of nothing. Even within your own galaxy, emptiness dominates. Stars are scattered, separated by light years of barren space. The Milky Way is mostly void. It spirals deceptive illusions of density. If your solar system were shrunk to the size of a coin, the nearest star would still be several kilometers away. You live in isolation, and always will not zoom in, and the emptiness remains. Atoms, which make up your body and everything you touch, are mostly space. The nucleus is minuscule compared to the atom size. If the atom were a stadium, the nucleus would be a grain of sand at its center, the electrons distant and diffuse. Matter is emptiness pretending to be solid. What you think of as substance is void dressed as form. Physics makes the void even stranger. Quantum fields ripple in empty space, particles flickering into and out of existence. The vacuum seethes, yet it contains nothing tangible. You might imagine the vacuum as background, but it is not even that. It is the absence of things pretending to be presence. Emptiness is the stage, and everything else is a brief performance upon it. Space also ensures isolation in time. The speed of light is finite, the cosmic speed limit. That means most of the universe is unreachable, not just practically, but fundamentally. Light from the most distant galaxies is already redshifted beyond visibility. Expansion accelerates, pushing galaxies away faster than light can bridge. They vanish from the observable horizon, not because they cease to exist, but because they have slipped beyond what can ever be known. Most of the universe is already gone from your sight forever. Loneliness is not metaphor, but law. The more the universe expands, the more alone you become. In the far future, galaxies beyond the local group will be invisible, their light stretched into nothing. Future civilizations will look at the night sky and see only darkness, unaware that anything else ever existed. The universe is emptying before your eyes, and your presence cannot stop it. Even within the tiny habitable pocket you inhabit, emptiness is lethal. Step into space without protection, and vacuum does not just suffocate, it boils your fluids, ruptures your lungs, freezes you in silence. The void is not passive absence. It is active hostility. You live only because a fragile atmosphere protects you. Beyond it, emptiness waits, vast and patient. Astronomy tempts you with wonder, nebulae glowing in colors, galaxies spiraling with grace. But every image is illusion, long exposures stitching together faint photons gathered over hours. To your eyes, those places would appear almost invisible. The beauty of space is the beauty of emptiness pretending to be full. Philosophically, emptiness devours meaning. You tell yourself you are significant, but what significance can cling to a mote adrift in infinite void? Civilizations may rise, but from the universe's perspective, they are sparks lost in endless night. You crave connection, but cosmic law enforces separation. You want fullness, but reality is emptiness. And worse, even the void is unstable. Quantum theory suggests the vacuum itself may decay. A bubble of lower energy vacuum could appear anywhere, expand at the speed of light, and erase everything galaxies, stars, atoms, you without warning. A universe annihilated by its own emptiness. No defense, no escape, no awareness. Emptiness does not just surround you, it may consume you. So look again at the night sky. The stars that comfort you are fragile, temporary. The light that reaches you has crossed oceans of nothing. What you see is the faintest glow against an overwhelming abyss. So tell me, if reality is almost entirely emptiness, and your life occurs in a vanishingly small pocket of temporary fullness, then what do you think you are living in a universe, or a void that pretends to host one? You imagine time as a gentle current, carrying you forward, giving you order. You divide it into hours, days, years. You pin your life to calendars, clocks, anniversaries, as though time were a structure you could live inside. But time is not a house. It is a blade. It slices every moment away from you, irreversibly, mercilessly. You think of the present as real, but by the time you notice it, it is already gone. Your awareness lags behind reality by fractions of a second. Neuroscience reveals that what you call now is a construction, a stitched-together illusion your brain assembles from fragments. The present does not exist as you imagine it. You live always in the ghost of what has already happened, and the past you cling to is unreliable. Memory is not a record, but a reconstruction. Every recollection alters itself. Each time you remember, you reread. Your childhood, your joys, your traumas, all are distortions layered upon distortions. The past you think defines you is no more real than a dream retold too many times. It shifts, degrades, decays. How can you build a self on foundations that vanish as you stand upon them? The future, too, deceives. You project plans, ambitions, expectations, but all are fragile fictions. Chaos theory demonstrates how sensitive systems are to initial conditions, tiny differences yielding vast, unpredictable outcomes. The flutter of wings, the roll of dice, a shift of molecules. Any could unravel your imagined path. The future is not waiting for you. It does not exist. It is only the shadow cast by your longing. Even physics offers no refuge. Einstein revealed that time is not constant, not universal. It bends with gravity, stretches with speed. Astronauts orbiting Earth age differently than those on the ground. Time is not the steady march you feel. It is pliable, relative, unstable. Your sense of flow, of progression, is provincial, limited to your narrow perspective. From a larger view, time is not passing. It simply is already written. This leads to the block universe theory. Past, present, and future, all existing simultaneously. A four-dimensional structure where now is just a perspective. If this is true, then your life is not unfolding. It is already finished, every moment etched permanently into space-time. You are not moving forward, You are sliding across a frozen landscape, mistaking movement for destiny. Your choices are already made, your death already waiting, and yet, paradoxically, entropy drags you forward. The arrow of time, rooted in the increase of disorder, ensures that broken glass does not reassemble, that ashes do not revert to firewood. You move from order to disorder, from birth to decay, from being to non-being. Time is entropy's partner, escorting you toward dissolution. Every second that passes is a second of your structure collapsing. Think of how time manifests in your body. Cells divide imperfectly. DNA accumulates damage. Telomeres shorten. Wrinkles deepen, muscles weaken, synapses misfire. Time does not just pass, it carves. It writes itself into your flesh, leaving scars of its progress. You are a sculpture eroded by a chisel you cannot see. Even consciousness itself is fractured by time. You experience yourself as continuous, but neuroscience shows that continuity is illusion. The mind stitches discrete moments into a story, a narrative of you. In truth, awareness flickers. Each instant dies as the next arises, and the self you think is stable is a collage of corpses. History offers no escape. Civilizations rise and fall, languages blossom and die, monuments crumble. The march of time is always toward loss. The Library of Alexandria burned, cultures vanished, knowledge drowned. What you know today is built on ruins, and those ruins will one day be built upon again. Time erases always. And what of eternity? You imagine immortality as relief, but eternity is not salvation, it is torment. To exist forever in unchanging time is to drown in monotony, to be stripped of meaning by repetition. If time erases you, eternity erases meaning itself. Both are forms of annihilation. So time leaves you no refuge. The present is illusion, the past distortion, the future fantasy. Physics strips it of flow, entropy enforces its cruelty, biology etches its passage, history reveals its hunger. And at the end of this river, whether it flows or not, there is only disappearance. So, I ask you, if every moment you cling to dissolves the instant you grasp it, then what is left of you but the fading outline of something that was never truly there? You believe memory is your anchor. You cling to it as proof that you are continuous, that your past was real, that your identity is not just a passing shadow. Memory is the story you tell yourself about yourself. But memory is not a recording. It is not a photograph preserved in the vault of your mind. Memory is construction, distortion, invention. It lies more than it reveals, and what it preserves, it rewrites each time you call upon it. Neuroscience has shown this with brutal clarity. The hippocampus does not store perfect snapshots. It encodes fragment sensory traces, emotional tones, contextual cues. Each act of remembering is not retrieval, but reconstruction, like piecing together a shattered vase. And each reconstruction alters the memory itself. To recall is to rewrite. What you think is stable becomes unstable. What you think is certain becomes contaminated. Every memory you hold has been corrupted by every act of remembering it. Experiments prove how fragile memory is. Elizabeth Loftus demonstrated that people can be made to remember events that never happened. Suggestion plants false images in the mind, and soon the subject swears they recall details, emotions, context. Witnesses testify with confidence about crimes they never saw. Children insist they were lost in malls when they were not. The brain does not know the difference between what it reconstructs and what it invents. Even unprompted, memory warps itself. You misremember timelines, conflate events, alter details to fit current beliefs. You smooth over contradictions, adjust narratives, erase what is inconvenient. Your memories serve not truth, but coherence. They preserve not what happened, but what allows you to think you know who you are. And what happens when memory fails altogether. Alzheimer's disease, dementia, traumatic brain injury, all reveal the dependence of self on memory. When memory dissolves, the self dissolves. Personality alters, continuity breaks. You see this in the elderly who no longer recognize their children, in patients who loop endlessly in the present, unable to recall the last minute. Without memory, you are not yourself. Without memory, you are no one. But even in health, your memory betrays you. Think of dreams, sometimes vivid, sometimes impossible, often forgotten within seconds. What are dreams but proof that your brain can generate convincing experiences and discard them as if they never were? Now imagine your waking life is no different. What if your so-called memories are simply dreams you have failed to identify as false? Philosophers have long questioned this. Descartes imagined an evil demon deceiving him into believing false memories. Modern thinkers speak of simulation theory, where entire histories could be fabricated as part of a programmed illusion. If memory can be manufactured in labs and corrupted in life, why are you so confident that the memories you hold are any more real? History itself suffers the same distortion. Collective memory, the stories cultures tell, are rewritten constantly. Victors reshape events to justify themselves. Nations sanitize atrocities, exalt myths, erase failures. Monuments tell lies in stone. What you call history is not truth but narrative, built from selective memory. If your personal identity is built on false memories, your cultural identity is built on even greater fabrications. Even sensory memory betrays you. Optical illusions exploit how your brain fills gaps. You see motion where none exists, colors that are not present, shapes that shift with context. Your eyes deceive, your ears mishear, and the brain stitches the errors into a seamless story. If you cannot trust what you just saw, why should you trust what you think you saw years ago? And what of the moments you cannot remember at all? Vast swaths of your life vanish. Early childhood is gone to infantile amnesia. Entire days slip into nothingness. Hours, weeks, sometimes years fade into obscurity. You are left with fragments stitched into a story, and you call that story your life. But the gaps are larger than the fabric. The story is a patchwork pretending to be whole. Memory is betrayal because it gives you confidence. You say, I know who I am because I remember. But what you remember is inaccurate, rewritten, partial, fabricated. You are not recalling truth. You are inventing it every time, and you are believing the invention. You are a liar to yourself, and the worst part is that you do not know you're lying. And when the last memory fades, when the brain fails, or death arrives, all stories end. The fragile illusions dissolve. What you called your life evaporates into nothing, because memory was never preserved in the first place. So now face the deeper horror. If memory is distortion, if it invents as much as it recalls, then who are you? Really someone who lived, or someone your own lies have convinced you once existed? You cling to the belief that you choose. You say, I decide, I want, I will. You live as though each action springs from some inner freedom, some authentic will. But the science of the brain, the logic of causality, and the shadows of philosophy whisper otherwise. They whisper that free will is an illusion and afterimage, painted onto decisions already made. Neuroscientists have shown this with brutal precision. In the 1980s, Benjamin Libet's experiments measured brain activity before conscious awareness of choice. Electrodes revealed a readiness potential neural firing that occurred hundreds of milliseconds before the subject reported making a decision to act. The brain had already begun the motion. Consciousness arrived late, like a commentator announcing a race after the runner has already crossed the line. Later studies confirmed it. Brain scans can predict decisions seconds before subjects are aware of them. The thought, I choose, is not the cause. It is the echo. Think about this carefully. You believe you are the author of your actions. But what if you are merely the witness? What if your brain decides, and then feeds you the comforting illusion that you decided? You are not captain, but passenger. You are not actor, but spectator. Philosophy anticipated this before science proved it. Spinoza argued that the sense of free will arises from ignorance of causes. A stone flying through the air might think it moves freely, unaware of the force that launched it. So too with humans. You act under causes hidden from you, and then you feel free only because you do not see the strings pulling you. Modern neuroscience expands this view. Every choice arises from prior causes: genes, environment, brain chemistry, hormonal fluctuations, random noise in neural circuits. You did not choose your genetics. You did not choose your childhood. You did not choose the culture that shaped you, the language that taught you categories, the traumas that carved scars into your behavior. Yet all these factors determine how you respond, what you desire, how you act. Where, in this cascade of causes, is freedom? Even randomness does not save free will. Suppose neural noise adds unpredictability. Does that make you free? No. A random coin flip inside your neurons is not you making a choice. It is chaos masquerading as agency. A choice that is determined is not free, and a choice that is random is not yours. Either way, free will evaporates. You might resist. You might insist, but I feel free. I feel myself choosing, but feelings deceive. You also feel the sun move across the sky, though it is the earth that spins. You feel solidity in objects, though they are mostly empty space. You feel memory is accurate, though it lies constantly. Why should your feeling of freedom be any more reliable? Consider daily life. You crave food. Did you choose the craving? You feel anger. Did you choose the surge of chemicals that produced it? You fall in love. Did you choose the cocktail of neurotransmitters and childhood attachments that shaped that feeling? You tell yourself stories after the fact. I wanted this. I chose this. I decided this. But the stories are narratives pasted onto events that were already unfolding. Even morality trembles under this weight. If there is no free will, then guilt, blame, punishment all become suspect. Can you blame someone for acting when they could not have done otherwise? A murderer kills. Was it choice, or the inexorable product of genes, abuse, poverty, and brain chemistry? A saint sacrifices. Was it virtue, or the inevitable flowering of upbringing and biology? Without freedom, no one deserves blame. Without freedom, no one deserves praise. Justice collapses, replaced only by pragmatism. Restrain the dangerous, encourage the kind, but abandon the illusion of deserts. Religion, too, falters. Many faiths depend on the notion of moral responsibility, sin, virtue, repentance, salvation. But if you cannot freely choose, what sense is there in damnation or reward? What meaning is left in commandments if they could never be obeyed or disobeyed, except as dictated by causes beyond your control? And yet, the illusion of free will may be necessary. Perhaps it is evolution's trick to feel free so that responsibility and effort remain possible. A society where no one believes in choice may dissolve into chaos. If no one feels accountable, why strive? Why resist temptation? Why care? So you are wired to believe in a freedom you do not possess, because the belief sustains survival, cooperation, civilization. But strip the illusion away, and the horror emerges. You are a puppet made of neurons. You are a cascade of chemical inevitabilities. You are a script unfolding, written by forces you never touched. You live as if you write your story, but the story writes you. And what of meaning? If every thought is determined, if every decision is an illusion, then what becomes of the self? You are not a free agent, not a soul choosing its path, but a mechanism, a process. a biological machine tricked into thinking it is free. Yet here is the final cruelty. Even knowing this, you cannot escape the feeling of freedom. You will still feel that you choose what to say next, what to eat, whom to love. You will still blame, praise, regret, and plan. You are trapped in an illusion you cannot shed, a theater where the play is already written, but you still believe you are, improvising. Free will dies in the spaces between neurons, and with it dies the last defense of the self as master. You are not free. You never were. You never will be. You believe your memories anchor you. You tell yourself they are the evidence of who you are, the threads that weave your identity into continuity. Without them, you think you would be unmoored, adrift, annihilated. And yet, memory, the one thing you trust most, is not a faithful archive. It is a deceiver, constantly rewriting itself, warping with each recall, bending under the weight of suggestion. The very thing you rely on to know yourself is the most fragile, treacherous illusion of all. Psychologists have revealed the extent of memory's betrayal. Elizabeth Loftus demonstrated it with chilling clarity. By planting false details in witness testimony, she showed how easily memory can be manipulated. People swore they had seen glass shatter in a car accident when none had broken. They recalled being lost in a mall as children when no such event occurred. They even remembered meeting Bugs Bunny at Disneyland. Impossible, since Bugs is not a Disney character. Suggestion plus imagination fused into certainty, and certainty became indistinguishable from truth. Memory is not a recording. It is reconstruction. Each time you recall, you rebuild the past from fragments, filling gaps with invention, smoothing edges with lies. And each reconstruction overwrites the original trace, so the more often you remember something, the less accurate it becomes. Memory does not preserve. It erodes. Memory does not reveal. It fabricates. What does this mean for identity? If who you are depends on who you remember being, but your memories are false, then who are you? You might believe you carry a continuous self stretching backward through time, but perhaps that continuity is a hallucination stitched together from distorted snapshots, misremembered scenes, and implanted details. You might not be the person you think you were. You might not even be the person you were yesterday. Consider trauma. Survivors often recall their experiences with striking clarity, but research shows trauma memories can be both vivid and unreliable. Details shift, timelines blur, entire episodes may be exaggerated or suppressed, yet the emotional weight feels immovable, unquestionable. The pain is real, even if the narrative is not. What does it mean when suffering is tied to memories that may not be true? And what of history on the collective scale? Nations, cultures, religions, all are built on memory, on stories passed down as truth. But these too are subject to distortion, embellishment, selective forgetting. Collective memory is propaganda masquerading as heritage, myth draped in the costume of truth. If personal memory is false, then national memory is a cathedral built on sand. Even your most intimate memories, the face of a loved one, the sound of a childhood room, the last words of someone who died, are not safe. They shift each time you recall them, subtly altered by mood, context, and suggestion. You believe you hold something sacred, but what you hold is plastic, mutable. A copy of a copy of a copy. Neuroscience deepens the horror. Memories are stored not in a single place, but across networks of neurons. Each recall reactivates the network, but in doing so, makes it malleable again. This is reconsolidation. Every act of remembering destabilizes the memory, opens it to modification, and then restabilizes it in altered form. To remember is to rewrite. To remember is to destroy. And what of the memories you have lost? Childhood years fade, not because they were unimportant, but because the brain prunes and compresses. You may believe those years shaped you, but you cannot access them. They have dissolved. Does that mean the self you carry is amputated, built on fragments? Or worse, what if every memory is false? Radical philosophers like Derrida questioned the very possibility of an original memory. If memory is always mediated by language, perception, and reconstruction, then the true event is inaccessible. There is no pure memory-only interpretation, only narrative, only fiction pretending to be fact. Now think about how dangerous this is. If you cannot trust memory, you cannot trust testimony. If you cannot trust testimony, you cannot trust history. If you cannot trust history, then what anchors reality itself? You are left floating in a sea of stories, with no way to distinguish fact from fabrication. And yet you must live as if memory were real, because without it, you would dissolve into incoherence. Consider also the darker experiments. In 2015, neuroscientists implanted false memories in mice by activating certain neurons with light. The mice remembered experiences that never happened and acted accordingly. If false memory can be engineered in animals, why not in humans? What if some of your memories were never yours, but planted by suggestion, culture, propaganda, or manipulation? How would you know? The very question of who you are collapses under this weight. If identity is built on memory, but memory is unreliable, and the self is unreliable, perhaps you are nothing but a shifting story told to yourself by yourself, a narrative with no original reference point, a fiction constantly rewritten in your own brain. And here is the final cruelty. You cannot stop trusting memory. Even now, as you recall what you read in Section 1, Section 2, Section 10, your mind has already altered them, already softened or sharpened certain phrases, already lost pieces, already invented transitions that were never there. You believe you are following a clear, continuous descent, but you are not. You are following a distorted echo of what was written. You cannot hold on to the truth. You never did. So ask yourself, if memory is false and identity is built on memory, then what is left of you? You speak of being conscious as if it were obvious, as if the simple fact of being aware explains itself. You wake in the morning and say, I am here, I am thinking, I am aware. But awareness is not a thing you can hold. It is not blood, not neurons, not molecules. Science dissects the brain, slices neurons, maps electrical patterns, and yet nowhere does it find the raw presence of experience. The redness of red, the sharpness of pain, the weight of grief, these are real to you, and yet invisible to every instrument. Consciousness slips through the nets of science like smoke through fingers. Philosophers call this the hard problem. How does matter produce mind? How does physical process become subjective experience? The brain is a machine of cells firing. Neurons exchange ions, release neurotransmitters, generate waves. But how does this become the feeling of music, the image of a face, a taste of salt? How does blind chemistry turn into living awareness? Some scientists try to deny the problem. They say consciousness is nothing but computation, nothing but neural representation, nothing but function. But this evades the core. To say consciousness is computation explains no more than saying a symphony is vibrations. True, but insufficient. The vibrations explain how sound travels, but not why it feels like music. Neural activity explains behavior, but not why it feels like experience. And yet you cannot deny consciousness. You can doubt the external world, doubt other people, doubt science, but you cannot doubt your own awareness. You can doubt everything except the fact that you are doubting. This is Descartes' insight. Cogito, ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. But notice the inversion. You cannot prove anything else exists. You cannot prove there is a world beyond your experience. You cannot prove that other minds are real. You only know there is an experience unfolding, and you are trapped inside it. This leads to the horror of solipsism. What if nothing exists but your mind? What if the universe is not matter but dream? You cannot escape this possibility, because everything you know comes through consciousness. Every proof, every experiment, every measurement, every interaction, each one is mediated by awareness. You cannot step outside your own experience to verify what lies beyond. And the opposite horror. What if your consciousness is not special? What if awareness is not unique to you, but a property of all matter? Some philosophers, like panpsychists, argue that consciousness pervades the universe, that even electrons have proto-experiences that matter itself feels. But if everything is conscious, then your awareness is nothing remarkable, nothing sacred, nothing unique. You are not a flame in the darkness. You are one flicker among infinite sparks. Consider the split brain experiments. When the corpus callosum, the bridge between brain hemispheres, is severed, two centers of awareness emerge. One hemisphere can see something the other cannot, act without the other's knowledge, even disagree. Does this mean that one person became two? If so, then what anchors the unity of your consciousness now? Perhaps you are already multiple, a chorus speaking as one, an illusion of unity stitched from fragments. And think about anesthesia. One moment you are conscious, the next you are gone. No dreams, no awareness, nothing. And you return. Where were you in the meantime? Did you vanish? Were you annihilated and then recreated? Or was there simply no self to vanish, because the self was never more than activity, ever more than fire that flickers when fuel is present and extinguishes when it is not? Even stranger, consider the binding problem. At any moment, you experience sights, sounds, smells, thoughts, emotions, all seamlessly unified into a single field of consciousness. But in the brain, these processes are scattered across regions, asynchronous, fragmented. There is no central place where it all comes together. So how does the unity arise? The brain is disjointed, but the mind feels whole. Where is that wholeness generated? Nowhere. It may be that the wholeness itself is an illusion, a convenient lie told by neural processes. Technology forces the question further. If consciousness arises from computation, could machines be conscious? If so, then every AI, every program, every future simulation may harbor awareness. But if not, if consciousness requires something beyond computation, then we will never know where to find it. Either way, you are faced with uncertainty so profound that it shatters the boundary between human and machine, between living and non-living, between matter and mind. And what about death? If consciousness is fundamental, maybe it persists beyond the body. If consciousness is emergent, maybe it ends with the brain. But you cannot know. All you can know is this: consciousness is here now, and one day it will not be. Whether it dissolves, transforms, or persists, you cannot escape the cliff edge of unknowing. This is the paradox you live in. Consciousness is the only thing you can be certain of, and yet it is the one thing science cannot explain. It is undeniable, and yet inexplicable. It is the foundation of self, and yet possibly an illusion itself. You look for it in neurons and find none. You look for it in philosophy and find riddles. You look for it in yourself and find only the awareness of looking. And here's the most unsettling question of all. If consciousness is the ghost you cannot trap, then what are you really? Are you the ghost, or are you the trap that believes it holds one? You believe you think freely. You believe ideas rise unbound, that your mind can explore any terrain, grasp any truth, imagine any possibility. But thought is not free. Thought is trapped in the prison of language, and you have lived so long inside its walls that you no longer see them. You confuse the cage with the world itself. Every thought you form is shaped by words. You think in sentences, in symbols, in structures learned before you could remember learning. But words are not neutral. They carve reality into categories, slicing infinity into manageable fragments. The categories of your language dictate what you can see, what you can describe, what you can even imagine. Consider the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, the idea that language shapes perception. Cultures with different words for colors literally see the spectrum differently. Russian speakers, whose language distinguishes between light blue, goluboy, and dark blue, sini, detect color shifts faster than English speakers. The Himba of Namibia, with a single word for blue and green, often fail to distinguish between them at all. Perception itself bends to language, dot, and numbers. Some Amazonian tribes have no words for numbers beyond 1, 2, and many. There, members struggle to keep track of precise quantities, not because they are unintelligent, but because without words to hold numbers, numbers dissolve. Without language, abstract counting cannot exist. Think about time. English encodes it as linear, past, present, future, a timeline stretching ahead. But Aymara, an indigenous language of the Andes, positions the past in front and the future behind, the known visible ahead, the unknown unseen behind. Their very conception of time flows differently. If you lived in their language, your experience of time itself would shift. Language is not a mirror. It is a filter. It does not show you reality as it is. It forces reality into forms your culture prepared for you. You believe you think, but in truth, you recite. Your thoughts are reruns of phrases, metaphors, idioms inherited from others. Philosophy reveals the depth of this trap. Ludwig Wittgenstein wrote, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." He was not exaggerating. What cannot be said cannot be thought. What cannot be thought cannot be seen. Try to imagine a color outside the visible spectrum. You cannot. Try to conceive a shape that is neither open nor closed. You cannot. Your imagination collapses at the edge of linguistic possibility. And consider the words themselves. Self, free will, reality. These are only symbols. Do you know what they truly mean? Or do you only shuffle them around, mistaking movement of symbols for insight? You can say time, but can you explain what time is? You can say consciousness, but the word carries no solution to its mystery. Language gives you the illusion of mastery. To name is to think you know. But naming is not knowing. It is only labeling the unknown with more unknowns. Even science is not free. Equations, terms, theories, all are expressed in language, bound by its categories. Mathematics feels pure, beyond words, but it too is a symbolic system, with axioms and definitions chosen by humans. There might be truths forever inaccessible, simply because your language cannot hold them. Entire dimensions of reality could exist, but your grammar cannot describe them. Your syntax cannot arrange them. Your metaphors cannot gesture at them. An identity. What is it but a story told in language? You say, I am this, I am that, but those I am statements are linguistic conventions. You are given a name, a category, a nationality, a gender. You accepted them before you could refuse them. You think of yourself within the confines of words forced upon you. Who would you be without them? You cannot even ask the question without using the very prison that confines you. There is also the recursive trap. You can only use language to analyze language. Every attempt to escape is another sentence, another definition, another word. You are like a prisoner pacing the walls of a cell, mistaking movement for freedom, never realizing the cell extends forever. Even silence is not an escape. Silence is defined against speech, absence measured against presence. To choose not to speak is still to act within the framework of language. You cannot flee it. You cannot step outside it, Think of dreams. They often feel vivid beyond words, but the moment you try to describe them, they collapse. You force them into grammar, and what was boundless becomes absurd. The ineffable is slaughtered on the altar of syntax. And yet, without words, you cannot hold on to them at all. What you cannot name slips away like water through fingers. If thought is bound by language, then your freedom of mind is an illusion. You do not think freely. You think according to structures inherited, imposed, invisible. Every philosophy you admire, every belief you hold, every scientific truth you cling to, all shaped, constrained, distorted by the invisible scaffolding of words. Language imprisons thought in invisible cages. And so the question remains, if every thought you have ever had is trapped in a prison you cannot leave, have you ever truly thought at all? You live as though your senses reveal the world directly. You trust your eyes to show you what is there, your ears to tell you what is happening, your skin to confirm what you touch. But perception is not a window, it is a construction. What you think of as the world is not what exists, but what your brain assembles from fragments, guesses, and deceptions. Reality reaches you only after it has been edited, filtered, distorted. You never see what is. You only see what your brain allows. Vision is the most brutal proof. At any moment, your eyes take in a chaotic flood of photons, upside down, incomplete, riddled with gaps. The blind spot where your optic nerve exits the retina leaves a hole in the image, but you never notice. Your brain fills it in automatically with what it guesses should be there. Every time you look at the world, part of what you see is fiction. Illusions expose this manipulation. The Muller-Lyer illusion. Two lines of equal length appear different because of arrow tips at the ends. You cannot unsee the difference, even knowing it is false. Or the checker shadow illusion. Two squares, one in shadow and one in light, appear radically different in shade, though they are identical. Your brain alters the input to maintain coherence, sacrificing truth for usefulness. And sound. You believe you hear accurately, but your brain edits here too. In noisy rooms, you fill in words you did not catch. The McGurk effect shows how vision warps hearing. Watch a mouth silently mouthing ga while the sound ba plays, and your brain insists you hear da. It fuses sight and sound into something neither contains. What you hear is not the world. It is an invention. Smell and taste, they too deceive. Taste depends heavily on smell. Block the nose and flavors collapse. Even more, expectations shape flavor itself. Serve cheap wine in an expensive bottle, and experts praise its richness. Serve white wine tinted red, and tasters describe it as though it were red. Perception is not passive, it is suggestible, corruptible, but the deepest manipulation occurs in time itself. Neuroscience shows that your brain does not process events in real time. There is always a delay of milliseconds while signals are gathered, interpreted, synthesized. Consciousness lags behind the world. And yet you experience the world as immediate. How? The brain edits presenting you with a seamless illusion of now, while quietly stitching together fragments from the past. The present you live in is a reconstruction, not an instant. And notice this. Perception is tuned not for truth, but for survival. Evolution did not build you to see reality as it is. Donald Hoffman's interface theory of perception argues that accurate perception would be lethal. A species that saw all the complexity of reality would be overwhelmed. Instead, evolution built you a simplified interface like icons on a computer desktop. The icon does not reveal the circuitry inside the machine. It hides it. You interact with symbols, not reality. What you call the world is the desktop interface of survival, not the truth of existence. Hallucinations reveal the fragility of the system. Under psychedelics, sensory systems unravel, and the brain produces vivid experiences disconnected from external input. But what does this show? That your normal perception is also a controlled hallucination, stabilized only by consistency and feedback. Reality, as you see it, is a hallucination you happen to share with others. Even attention betrays you. You think you see the world in detail, but you do not. Change blindness experiments reveal this. A person switches behind a passing object, and you often do not notice. Entire features of a scene can change while your gaze shifts, and you remain unaware. Your brain edits out discontinuities, convincing you of a richness that is not there. And dreams. Every night, your brain manufactures entire worlds indistinguishable from waking life until you wake. If you can be so utterly convinced of false reality in sleep, how do you know you are not dreaming now? Descartes asked this centuries ago, and the question remains unanswered. If perception can construct one convincing world, why not another? This means that what you call reality is less reality than consensus hallucination. The world you inhabit is not the world. It is a model edited for utility, stitched together from guesses, illusions, and lies. You do not see atoms. You do not hear electromagnetic waves. You do not feel the quantum fields beneath matter. You interact with shadows painted for survival, not truth. And here is the fracture. If perception is fabrication, then truth itself is inaccessible. You cannot know what the world is, only how your brain edits it. You cannot see reality. You can only see the hallucination evolution gave you. So the question becomes, if everything you perceive is edited before you ever see it, how would you ever know if you have never once seen the real world? You think of time as a steady river, flowing from past to present to future, carrying you forward in its current. But physics dismantles this illusion. Time is not what you believe. It is not a universal ticking clock, not a guarantee of progress, not even something that flows. It is a dimension, tangled and strange, where past, present, and future exist simultaneously, indifferent to your fragile sense of sequence. Einstein's theory of relativity shattered the idea of absolute time. The rate at which time passes depends on speed and gravity. A clock on a speeding spaceship ticks slower than one on Earth. A clock closer to a black hole ticks slower than one farther away. This means there is no single now shared across the universe. What is the present for you may already be the future for someone else, and the past for another. Your present is not privileged, it is just one slice in a vast, indifferent block of spacetime. The block universe theory pushes the knife deeper. According to this view, all moments past, present, future exist eternally. The day you were born, the moment you die, and every second in between are equally real. The flow of time is not a property of the universe, but an illusion created by consciousness. You feel time moving because your brain sequences experiences, not because time itself moves. In other words, your sense of progress is a hallucination. If all moments already exist, what does that mean for your choices? Free will collapses into determinism. You are not shaping your future. You are merely walking along a path already laid. The sense of decision, of "I could have done otherwise," is another trick of consciousness. Neuroscience supports this. Experiments by Benjamin Libet revealed that your brain initiates actions milliseconds before you become consciously aware of deciding. The future is already written into your neurons before you appear to choose it. Even the arrow of time, the fact that you remember the past but not the future, is fragile. Entropy, the tendency for systems to move toward disorder, gives the illusion of a direction. But entropy itself is statistical, not absolute. Some physicists argue that the arrow of time emerges only from our limited perspective. From a godlike view of space-time, there is no arrow, no before and after, only a frozen, eternal whole dot. So what does this mean for you, trapped in your subjective present? It means that every joy, every mistake, every loss has already happened, is happening, and will forever happen. You are not moving through time. You are pinned inside it, like an insect in amber, condemned to believe in motion where there is only stasis. You tell yourself, I am alive, I am moving forward. But forward compared to what? If all moments are equally real, then where exactly are you going? You live your life with death always at the periphery, a shadow you pretend not to see. You treat it as an end point, a curtain that falls after the play, a vanishing into nothing. But philosophy and science both suggest something more disturbing. Death may not erase you, it may expose you. Consider Epicurus, who argued that death is nothing to us, because where we are, death is not, and where death is, we are not. At first glance, this seems comforting. But think deeper. If consciousness simply ceases, then your entire existence has been a temporary ripple in nothingness. That means the continuity you hold so dearly, the sense of I, was never anything more than a flicker against an infinite dark. You were never necessary. You never mattered, but other ideas make it worse. Neuroscience shows that what you call you is just electrical patterns, neural firing sustained by fragile biological tissue. When those patterns stop, your consciousness ceases. Yet physics insists that information cannot be destroyed. If the information that constituted your mind cannot be erased, where does it go? Does it scatter into meaningless entropy, or does it remain encoded in some form you cannot perceive? Think of the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. Every possible event branches into multiple universes, which means that in countless versions of reality, you never died in that car accident, never took that fateful step, never stopped breathing. Death happens here, but not there. In this sense, death is not an end, but a divergence and infinite splitting where some versions of you continue. But which one is you? If identity is already fragile, what does it mean when it fractures across endless possible worlds? And then comes the hardest question. What is it like to be dead? Thomas Nagel asked what it is like to be a bat, how consciousness tied to an alien perception would feel. But death is stranger still. It is not another perception, not another state of awareness, but the absence of awareness altogether. Can you imagine not imagining? Can you think of what it feels like not to think? The effort collapses in paradox, because to conceive of nothingness is already to smuggle in something. Religions promise continuity souls, reincarnation, heavens, hells. But each is just another attempt to escape the unbearable weight of finality. Strip those away, and you are left with silence. Yet silence itself raises a question. If you cannot experience non-existence, then from whose perspective does death even occur? If the end of you is unknowable, does that mean you will never truly know that you are gone? You cling to life as though it guarantees meaning. But if meaning ends when you do, was it ever real? So tell me, when you finally face the mirror of death, what do you expect to see staring back? You tell yourself that you are free. You wake up, select your clothes, decide what to eat, choose what words to speak. Every moment of your day feels like a sequence of deliberate acts, each one proof that you are not bound, not enslaved, not determined. But peel away the illusion, and you find something unbearable. Your freedom is a script already written. Your choices a mirage born of constraints you never escaped. Philosophers have wrestled with this for centuries. Determinists argue that every action, every thought, every desire you have is the product of prior causes, your genetics, your upbringing, your environment, the state of the universe at the moment of your birth. You chose coffee over tea because the neurons in your brain, conditioned by years of reinforcement and biology, fired in a predictable pattern. Where, in this chain of causation, is the free will you cling to? Neuroscience confirms the suspicion. Benjamin Libet's experiments showed that the brain initiates decisions milliseconds before you are consciously aware of making them. When you think, "I have decided," the decision has already been made. Your consciousness arrives late, a narrator describing an action that was already unfolding. You are not the author. You are the afterthought. Compatibilis tried to soften the blow. They say freedom doesn't mean escaping causality. It means acting in accordance with your desires. But if your desires themselves are caused by brain chemistry, by trauma, by the weather, by the position of planets when you were born, then how is that different from compulsion? You are a puppet arguing that the strings are just part of your nature. Even your rebellions are predictable. Studies show that when people are told their choices are determined, they often act out in defiance, as though doing so proves their freedom. Yet that very reaction, too, is predicted by psychological models. The rebellion is already written into the script. You cannot escape the page you were born into. And what of randomness? Some argue that quantum indeterminacy introduces unpredictability into the universe. But what does randomness offer you? If your actions are determined, you are not free. If they are random, you are not in control. Neither option grants you the freedom you imagine. Your life feels like a series of forks in the road, each one demanding a choice. But what if the path was never yours to choose? What if every turn, every hesitation, every resolution was inevitable, the only possible unfolding of matter and energy in this deterministic cosmos? You feel free only because the script requires that your character feels free before speaking the next line. So when you say, "I could have chosen differently," are you not whispering a lie? You have always assumed that meaning is out there, waiting to be discovered, like a buried treasure beneath the surface of existence. Religion, philosophy, even science each promises some hidden order that explains why there is something instead of nothing, why you exist instead of vanishing into void. But strip them bare, and what remains is an emptiness that refuses to answer. The universe is not hostile, not benevolent. It is indifferent. Consider the sheer scale of it. Our galaxy alone holds over 100 billion stars, and the observable universe contains more galaxies than you can comprehend. Against that immensity, your life is smaller than dust. The things you suffer for, the things you love, the moments that feel infinite to you, none of them ripple beyond your tiny sphere. The stars do not blink differently when you cry. The galaxies do not pause when you die. Philosophy has long recognized this abyss. Albert Camus wrote of the absurd, the tension between humanity's desperate need for meaning and the universe's silence in response. You want answers? The cosmos offers none. And in that silence, you confront the unbearable possibility that there was never an answer to seek. Science deepens the cruelty. The Copernican principle insists we are not at the center, not special, not privileged observers. Evolution shows we are products of blind selection, not design. Cosmology suggests that universes themselves may come and go, forming and collapsing with no concern for the life inside them. At no point is there a hint of purpose. Meaning is not written into the stars, it is projected onto them by desperate minds. And yet, you persist. You build religions, philosophies, ideologies, all fragile scaffolds to keep you from staring too long into the void. But every scaffold collapses. Gods contradict each other. Philosophies crumble into paradox. Science explains how, but never why. The silence remains. So you are left with a choice that is no choice at all. Either cling to illusions and live in a comforting lie, or strip them away and stand naked before a universe that does not care if you live or die. Both options end the same way, with the same silence, the same void, the same collapse of everything you hoped was real. You tell yourself, my life matters. But to whom? To what? And if the answer is only to me, then isn't that the cruelest silence of all? You imagine history as a record, a faithful account of events that unfolded before you were born. You believe that books, monuments, archives, and classrooms preserve the truth of what happened, that the past is a fixed, settled thing. But history is not the past. History is only what has been written, and what has been written has always been shaped by power, by omission, by fabrication. The past may be unchangeable, but history is infinitely malleable. Consider the phrase, history is written by the victors. Empires collapse, wars end, leaders rise and fall, and those who remain tell the story in a way that justifies their survival. Atrocities are minimized, defeats erased, victories inflated. Think of how colonial powers rewrote indigenous histories, burning records, destroying artifacts, and replacing centuries of culture with their own narratives. To later generations, the rewritten version becomes indistinguishable from truth. The lie becomes reality. George Orwell saw this clearly in 1984. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. But this is not just fiction. Totalitarian regimes throughout history have erased photographs, rewritten textbooks, and eliminated inconvenient facts. Stalin literally had people airbrushed out of official photos after they were purged. To the future, the altered record becomes the only record. Even in so-called free societies, history is curated. Textbooks in one country portray wars as noble struggles. In another, the same wars are invasions, crimes, atrocities. What you learn as the truth about history depends entirely on who is telling it and why. There is no neutral account. Every history is propaganda, and the problem goes deeper. Even the historians who seek truth are bound by sources, and sources themselves are unreliable. Eyewitnesses misremember. Documents are forged. Archaeological evidence is incomplete. The further back you look, the more speculative it becomes. At some point, the truth about history is little more than consensus and agreement among scholars. Not an absolute certainty, but the most unsettling fact is this: your own memories function the same way. Just as nations rewrite their pasts, you rewrite yours, smoothing contradictions, erasing pain, inventing coherence. You are your own propagandist, curating a narrative of self that feels consistent but is riddled with omissions. The history of the world and the history of your life are built on the same foundation, lies that have hardened into truth. So when you say, "This is what really happened," whose story are you really telling, and whose story have you erased? You believe words are tools, extensions of thought, bridges from your mind into another's. You think language expands your freedom, allowing you to name the world, to explain it, to share it. But the truth is the opposite. Language confines you. Every word you speak narrows possibility, reducing infinite experience into clumsy symbols. You are not using language. Language is using you. Consider the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. The structure of your language shapes the structure of your thought. A culture whose language has no future tense conceives of time differently. A culture with dozens of words for snow perceives snow differently. You cannot think outside the limits of your vocabulary, and even when you try, the thought collapses back into words. Language is not a transparent window. It is a cage. Wittgenstein wrote, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." Everything you see, know, or feel must pass through language to be communicated. But language is imprecise, abstract, always lagging behind reality. Try to describe the exact shade of the sky, the precise ache of your grief, the full intensity of a memory. No word is enough. Each attempt betrays what it was meant to capture. And yet, despite its failures, you cannot escape it. Even your private thoughts occur in language, or in images that must later be translated into language to make sense. Before you can act, Before you can decide, you narrate to yourself. You live not directly in reality, but in commentary about reality. You are trapped in a running monologue, believing you are free, while every thought bends back into words you did not choose. Worse still, language is inherited. The words you use were given to you by others, loaded with their meanings, their histories, their biases. When you say freedom, truth, or justice, you are not naming an objective reality, you are repeating concepts designed long before you were born. You think you are speaking your mind, but you are echoing the ghosts of dead tongues. And the final cruelty: language deceives. Words create the illusion of clarity where there is only ambiguity. They make categories seem real when they are arbitrary. They suggest permanence where there is only flux. You think you understand because you have named something, but the name is only a shadow dot. So ask yourself, when you speak, when you think, when you say do you control the words, or do the words control you? You wake each morning inside awareness, as though it were the most natural state in the world. You assume consciousness is a gift, the spark that makes you human, the proof that you are alive. But consciousness is not a gift, it is a wound. It is the unbearable awareness of existence without escape, the constant recognition of your own fragility, the endless mirror that cannot be shattered. Think of what it means to be conscious, to know that you are here, now alive, and therefore destined to die. No animal gazes into the abyss with such clarity. The cat feels hunger, the bird feels flight, but only you feel the burden of self-awareness, the paradox of existing while knowing you will cease. To live consciously is to live under a sentence, carried out second by second. Philosophy has long circled this wound. Descartes sought certainty with, "I think, therefore I am." But he missed the cruelty in his statement. To think is to be trapped, forced into awareness, chained to the self. Sartre described consciousness as nausea, an endless confrontation with absurdity, with the meaninglessness of existence. Heidegger called it being toward death, the condition of living in perpetual anticipation of an end that cannot be avoided. Neuroscience offers no escape. Consciousness arises not from a soul, but from fragile neural networks. The binding problem remains unsolved. How does the brain, a lump of matter, create the unified field of experience you call I? The answer may be that it doesn't. Consciousness may itself be an illusion, a convenient narrative stitched together by countless unconscious processes. Yet even if it is an illusion, you cannot wake from it. You are condemned to experience the hallucination of self-awareness until the machinery fails. Consider the hard problem of consciousness. As phrased by David Chalmers, why should physical processes in the brain produce subjective experience at all? Why should neurons firing create the sensation of red, the taste of salt, the pain of loss? There is no logical necessity for awareness to exist, yet it does. And its existence is torture, because it allows you to suffer, to regret, to anticipate death in ways that a purely unconscious machine never could. Every moment of joy is shadowed by this wound. You laugh, but you know it will end. You love, but you know loss is inevitable. You build, but you know decay is certain. Consciousness magnifies every pleasure by surrounding it with the awareness of its fragility. You cannot hold anything without knowing it will be taken. So you tell yourself, it is better to be aware than not. But is it? If a rock cannot suffer its own annihilation, and you must suffer yours every day of your life, then what advantage has consciousness given you, except the power to dread? And if consciousness is only a wound, then what exactly is bleeding? You inhabit your body as though it were yours, as though it were a vessel you control, a loyal companion that answers to your will. But the truth is far darker. Your body is not yours. It is a prison of flesh, a decaying machine sustained by compromise, endlessly sabotaging itself, carrying you not toward freedom, but toward inevitable collapse. Consider how little control you actually possess. Your heart beats without your command. Your lungs draw air without permission. Your digestive system grinds forward without your awareness. You do not will your immune cells to fight infection or your neurons to transmit signals. They act autonomously, indifferent to your imagined sovereignty. You are not the master of your body, but a passenger, carried along by processes too vast and ancient for you to influence. And yet, even those processes are fragile. Every cell in your body is engaged in a slow-motion suicide. DNA accumulates errors. Proteins misfold. Telomeres shorten. This is aging, not an accident, but a built-in mechanism of decay. From the moment you are born, your body is programmed to betray you, to weaken, to fail. Each wrinkle, each gray hair, each ache is a reminder that your prison walls are crumbling inward. Think of disease, cancers that arise from your own cells, turning against you. Neurodegeneration that eats away at the very circuits of your mind. Autoimmune disorders in which your immune system mistakes you for the enemy. Your body is not only fragile, it is treacherous. The same mechanisms that sustain you contain the seeds of your destruction. Philosophers have always recognized the body as a trap. Plato compared it to a tomb, distracting the soul from truth with hunger, lust, and pain. Schopenhauer saw the body as the inescapable expression of the will to live, a blind drive that enslaves you to endless cycles of craving and dissatisfaction. Even Buddhism insists that attachment to the body is attachment to suffering. Because the body cannot be preserved, modern science confirms their despair. The body is not a temple, but a battlefield. Every organ competing for resources. Every gene propagating its own selfish interest. You experience this chaos as hunger, fatigue, illness, desire sensations that bend your will to the survival of a machine that is already doomed. And in the end, the betrayal is complete. Muscles waste, memory frays, skin thins, organs fail. The prison does not suddenly collapse. It rots from within, forcing you to inhabit its disintegration minute by minute, aware of your decay, but powerless to reverse it. You comfort yourself with the illusion that you own your body. But if ownership means control, then what do you truly own? And when the prison finally crumbles to dust, what becomes of the prisoner inside? You treat time as though it were neutral, a blank canvas upon which your life unfolds. But this is a lie you whisper to yourself. Time is not your friend. Time does not heal. Time corrodes, consumes, erases. Every second you breathe is stolen from you by the clock that ticks within your cells, your bones, your mind. Think of how time feeds on you. Memories blur not because they are unimportant, but because time is actively erasing them, grinding them into dust. Your youth dissolves into photographs that no longer feel like yours. Your body stiffens, weakens, fails. The seasons do not simply pass, they strip you, layer by layer, until nothing remains but a husk. You may believe that time offers growth, maturity, wisdom. But this too is an illusion. What you call wisdom is merely the scar tissue of loss. What you call maturity is the resignation to inevitability. Time gives you nothing. It only takes, and yet you remain enslaved to its rhythm. You wake when the sun demands it. You eat when the hour tells you to. You labor according to schedules, deadlines, calendars. Even your emotions are bound by time. Nostalgia aches for what is lost. Regret chains you to the past. Anxiety devours you with visions of the future. The present, the only moment you ever truly possess, slips from your grip the instant you notice it. Religions have tried to soften this cruelty. They promise eternity, salvation, reincarnation, a realm beyond time. But these promises are desperate attempts to deny what is obvious. Time has no mercy, and it always wins. The universe itself is not immune. Stars burn out, galaxies drift apart, entropy spreads until everything dissolves into heat and silence. Time is not a stage for your existence. It is the blade that carves you down. You are not moving through time. Time is moving through you, hollowing you out from the inside dot, and when your final moment arrives, you will realize what you have always known. Time was not counting with you. It was counting against you. You live as if your memories are sacred proof of who you are. You cling to them like a child clings to a fading light in the dark. But science has already dismantled that illusion. Memory is not a recording. It is an act of fabrication. Every time you recall an event, you do not replay the past, you rewrite it. You create a copy of a copy, degrading, shifting, inserting fragments that never belonged. Consider the experiments of Elizabeth Loftus, who showed how easily false memories can be planted. People were convinced they had been lost in a shopping mall as a child, that they had met characters who never existed, that they had seen things that never occurred. They swore these memories were real, felt them in their bones, carried the weight of an event that never happened. The brain cannot distinguish between what it imagines and what it recalls. If your memory can be rewritten, then what are you? The person you think you have always been may never have existed at all. That argument you remember, that heartbreak, that moment of joy, they may be nothing more than distortions, hallucinations mistaken for truth, and history itself mirrors this fragility. Nations are built on collective memory, but collective memory is curated, manipulated, and rewritten by those who claim power over the narrative. Wars, genocides, atrocities, all softened, erased, distorted. What is taught in schools is not memory, but selective amnesia masquerading as truth. You are shaped not by what happened, but by what is remembered, and more importantly, by what is forgotten. Think carefully. When you remember your childhood, are you remembering, or are you remembering the story you told yourself about it? A story altered each time you told it? Do you remember your first love? Or do you remember the fiction you constructed to make sense of the ache? Do you remember who you are? Or only who you needed to believe yourself to be? If memory is unreliable, then identity collapses. You are not a continuous self, but a series of lies stitched together to give the impression of coherence. A body carrying a ghost made of faulty recollections. And so the haunting question becomes unavoidable. If everything you remember is unstable, then who exactly is it that you think is reading these words right now? You speak, you write, you think in words. You believe language is a tool for expressing truth. But language is not truth, it is a cage. It forces infinite complexity into crude, brittle symbols. Every thought you have, every emotion you feel, is strangled by the limits of vocabulary before it can even reach the world. Ludwig Wittgenstein once declared, "The limits of my language being the limits of my world." He was not being poetic. He was describing the trap. If you cannot name something, you cannot grasp it. Your reality is boxed in by the words you have been given. Entire realms of perception are closed to you simply because your tongue cannot articulate them. Think of how cultures carve different realities through language. The Inuit have dozens of words for snow, each describing nuances you cannot perceive because you are never trained to divide them. Some languages lack words for past or future, leaving their speakers to experience time differently. Others lack words for self altogether, shattering the illusion of individuality that English assumes. If your world feels solid, it is only because your language is narrow. Even your own inner voice is a linguistic parasite. You think you are you, but you are only the monologue your language produces. Without words, what remains? Without the endless narration of your mind, does anything of you exist at all? And then consider deception. Language does not only limit, it distorts. Propaganda, advertising, politics, they bend words to shape perception. You do not see reality directly. You see what language allows, filtered, twisted, weaponized. Words define your enemies, your heroes, your values. What you think you believe because language commanded you to. Ask yourself, when you say, I love, or I suffer, or I exist, what are you really saying? Are you naming truth, or are you merely repeating symbols that never touch the raw experience beneath them? Strip language away, and you strip yourself away with it. For if all you are is a creature of words, then without words, what is left? You believe you are the author of your actions. You say, I decided, I chose, I willed. But neuroscience has carved into this illusion with merciless precision. In the 1980s, Benjamin Leibotz's experiments showed that the brain initiates action before you become aware of deciding. The readiness potential in your neurons spikes milliseconds before you think, I will move. Your choice is not a choice. It is a story your mind invents after the act has already begun. The implications are devastating. Every decision you pride yourself on, every moment of hesitation, every assertion of free will and echo, a justification written by your brain to protect the fragile illusion that you are steering. But you are not the driver. You are the passenger, catching glimpses of the road only after the car has already taken the turn. Even deeper studies confirm it. Brain scans can predict your choices seconds before you consciously make them. What feels like freedom is predetermined circuitry. What feels like autonomy is choreography. Consciousness is not the source of action. It is the commentary track dot, and yet you cling to free will because the alternative is unbearable. Without it, morality collapses. How can you punish a criminal if he never chose? How can you forgive yourself if you never could have acted differently? How can you love if your choice to love was nothing more than synapses firing in inevitable sequence? Religion, philosophy, law, all of it rests on the fantasy of agency. Remove that fantasy, and every structure built upon it begins to rot. If no one truly chooses, then guilt, pride, justice, even meaning itself are lies we perform. But here is the final cruelty. Even knowing this, you cannot escape the illusion. You will still feel responsible for what happens next, even though responsibility is a mask your brain forces you to wear. You will still fear, still hope, still hesitate. You will still believe that you are choosing whether to continue reading. So tell me, if you are not the one who decides, then who is it that you think is deciding for you? You spend your life protecting something you call yourself. You build careers, relationships, reputations, all in service of this fragile construct. You insist on your uniqueness, your personality, your essence. But neuroscience, psychology, and philosophy converge on a brutal revelation. There is no unified self. Split brain experiments reveal this with surgical clarity. When the corpus callosum is severed, the two hemispheres of the brain function independently, each with its own perceptions, preferences, and impulses. One hand buttons the shirt while the other unbuttons it. One hemisphere can answer questions the other cannot even comprehend. Which half is you? Both? Neither? If your brain can be divided into competing selves, was there ever a singular self at all? Consider also the modular theory of mind. What you think of as a single consciousness is an orchestra of subsystems, some calculating probabilities, some generating emotions, some conjuring language, none of which fully understand the others. What you call I is merely the illusion of coherence that arises when these fragments are stitched together. A patchwork, not a person. Even Buddhism, long before neuroscience, declared that the self is an illusion, a fleeting aggregation of sensations and perceptions. Modern science echoes the same. You are a process, not an entity. A flame, not a lamp. And yet, without the illusion of self, your entire world collapses. Love requires a lover and a beloved. Ambition requires a person to strive. Fear requires someone to lose. If the self is not real, and neither is any of what you cling to, so you are caught in a paradox. To function, you must believe in yourself. To see clearly, you must accept that the self is a mirage. You are both prisoner and guard, both shadow and substance, both dream and dreamer. And if the self is an illusion, then the final, most disturbing question is this: when death comes, what is there that can truly die? You have followed this descent step by step, clinging to the hope that at the bottom you might find some hidden core of truth, some final anchor that could withstand the erosion of everything else. But here, at the end, there is no anchor. There is no bedrock. There is only the void you have been circling all along. History dissolves into revision and silence. Science collapses into paradox and uncertainty. Memory fractures into fiction. Language strangles what it cannot describe. Consciousness lags behind the machinery of the brain, and the self itself evaporates into a swarm of processes that never coalesce. You stand here empty-handed, realizing that everything you thought was solid was only scaffolding built from shadows. You were told life has meaning, but meaning requires a stable self to hold it. You are told time redeems, but time only erases. You are told truth is knowable, but every attempt to grasp it slips into contradiction. What you are left with is not knowledge, not clarity, not peace, but silence. And silence is the only truth. Not the silence of rest, but the silence of absence. The silence of a world that was never listening to you in the first place. The silence of a self that was never real enough to speak. You may still feel the urge to resist, to insist that you are different, that you are real, that you can choose to hold on. But that resistance too is illusion, another reflex produced by systems that will vanish with you. Even your protest belongs to the machinery. Even your desperation is not yours. So here is the final collapse. You do not exist. You never did. You are only ever the temporary dream of matter and time, a flicker in the void, pretending to be a flame. And if you never existed, then tell me, what is it, exactly, that is still pretending to read these words?